Greetings, gamers, and welcome to the 78th livestream from the Misfit Gamer Studios. I'm your host, Vortex, and this is D&D Discussions. Today we have a very special Deeper Discussions. I say special because it's been long awaited. We've had this topic submitted to us many weeks ago by our viewer Babakis, who is in chat right now. Thank you for showing up. It's been awesome seeing you here. And yes, we had this topic submitted. I wanted to do sufficient research, so I dug into as much as I could on the history of this in D&D. Surprise, surprise, turns out there's not much. But I wanted to expand upon that. I wanted to get into a couple of the different areas of lore that I know that have referenced it. But unfortunately, again, the more I realized, the more I researched, the more I realized that they weren't as extensive as I would have liked them, and they were more reference points, and the rest of it kind of told the narrative. So we went through a couple different ways of trying to figure out how we wanted to discuss this. Do we want to do like a homebrew review where we just openly talk about it and then just see where the conversation goes? Do we want to base it more off of real world mythos? And in our search, we kind of last minute took a very weird turn that kind of brought us to something we weren't really prepared for, and it's going to be fantastic. It ties kind of right into what Babakis had submitted before and what brought this whole conversation up. But yeah, we were not prepared for what we had found. It was kind of exciting. I think it's going to bring more to the conversation than ever, than we would have normally. And it may or may not happen again. This might just be a one-time thing because it is an area that I'm not super comfortable with leaning towards in terms of how heavy we're going to be in terms of the content generation. Usually I don't mind getting some inspirational help, but this might be the one and only time we lean this heavy into utilizing what we got. So yeah, that's kind of a little prep there. We are waiting for update from Babakis, so I will check the Discord here. So let me get Kage on screen, and we will begin today's Deeper Discussions. There you are. What is up, my dude?
Shalom, friends. How is everyone? Excited to be here as always. This is going to be a very, very cool topic, I think. I'm trying to see. I've seen this approached from a lot of different angles, and a lot of what you were talking about as far as where some of the inspiration from what we're doing tonight is you need to have, like, we had a lot of different pop culture references. I think one of the different areas that had like an idea of Leylines was what was one of them? You mentioned Avatar. You mentioned I mentioned what's it called? Genshin Impact, because they have a whole Leyline systems in there. Did you say there was some in the Dresden series? I'm not super.
I did try to look up. I mean, these were areas that, yeah, I looked up the Dresden's files and tried to see, because I remember they talked a little bit about that, but then again, it was just in reference. And again, they draw a lot more on the real world mythos. So not really quite there. Okay, yeah, I was able to open up the file.
Oh, you were able to?
Yeah.
Is there something I needed?
I just clicked right on it. Didn't no issue.
That's what I did. It sent me to, I had to request access or something.
Oh, no, I got right in.
Oh, all right then. Oh, there we go. Groovy.
Oh, I see people. I see an anonymous wolf.
Oh.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, so Periclesis, that's a name I haven't heard in a minute. All right, that's going to be a fun little read. I actually brought up a little bit history, so we'll do a little bit of a history lesson as well. Yeah, but yeah, man, how was your week? How did the week go for you?
It was pretty chill. Like, it started off real slow. We'll put it that way. I don't know if you've had those weeks where it's just like, it's like very slow, chug-a-lug-a-lugging, like you're making an uphill battle. But we made it through over hump day and on our way down again. So, I'm excited. Weekends here. I'm gonna do a whole lot of. Well, not nothing. I never do a whole lot of nothing, but yeah. I'm excited.
Okay. Whew. Interesting.
You're right. Did your whole world change?
Babakis, what are you doing to us? No, this is going to be fun. This is going to be a fun stream tonight.
I'm here for it.
We have a lot going on. So Kiss, since this is your topic, since you've submitted this, and since you are actually here for it, which we really absolutely appreciate. Hold on, why is this all... I don't know why. I just have a thing about my microphone, like, actually...
Not acting up?
Just not being, like, tilted. So, since you were here... we have a couple different ways to go about this because I didn't realize that you had finished the idea. Probably my fault for not getting to this topic a little bit sooner. But we have a bit of information to cover. So I need to make some notes for myself so I can give you some options on how you want to run this or how you would like to. So what do we exactly have? So we have... we have a brief history.
I like these names already.
We have your build. We have our ideas. And then we have the generated. Okay, so... it's not finished, so you have foundation, pretty solid A. That's fantastic what you gave us, because I was still, I had all this in my mind. I've been thinking about it, but again, I don't like to overthink things that I'm going to do on stream because I'll end up thinking through all of my ideas, and then I'm sitting there trying to remember instead of be creative about it.
Exactly.
I end up suffering from, instead of just rethinking of the idea, I'll end up having to try and think about what I had thought about, and I won't get half of it out. So
that's fair.
Okay, so Baba Kiss, we have 4 essentially different categories that we can cover today. So I'll let you choose the order. We have the very brief history of Leylines as it applies to D&D. It's not going to be much. It's just... there's a couple of different mentions there. We have your build, the one that you just submitted to us. We have our ideas, which will just be an overall generation of the different ways that we can just kind of, that we would apply it or that we have applied it in the past. I can talk about the way that it applies to High Point or how I've seen it in other games. And then the last one is the kind of the surprise idea, the one that even we weren't really... ready for, because as we were sitting here chatting before stream and I had already written some ideas and some notes out, and Kage and I were talking about those and just kind of getting prepped for how we wanted to build out the discussion. Oh, save the surprise for last. Okay. Yeah. So I haven't really been using it a lot, but I did want to, build on this idea in a unique way. So we will save that for last. Okay. So we will start with the very brief history of just how Leylines have happened in D&D. We will end with the surprise, because I think that's actually the best, because not only the surprise has the most information, but it does, I think, have, surprisingly enough, the surprise has that nice tie-in to Baba Kiss's original build.
Right.
So that'll be a nice little slip in there. When it was first sent
to us. I remember that.
So... So I think what we'll do is we'll start with a brief history. We'll go over what you've submitted, because at least that way we'll have the foundation of where we are, and that will give us a better foundation to give you some ideas that we would work with that. Because that right there is going to be, I can already tell by what you've submitted and by the Paraclesis background, you are going in a slightly different direction than we would have. So I want to get us in that foundational mindset before we do any launching off. So
I like that.
We'll start with that. So without further ado, we will begin our topic for today, which is going to be Leylines. And we will start with the history.
Leylines.
Yes, we will start with the history of Leylines as it applies to D&D, which is monstrously small. So when I did this research, I kept digging, and as far back as I could go, essentially, there are no official rules for Leylines. That's it. Brief history over.
Just a whole lot of nothing?
No. So Leylines as they apply to D&D, Leylines aren't actually an official D&D setting thing. They're not an official rule set. They're not anything that you would be able to take from the writings. However, monstrosity. But there is a little bit of tied in history, and so you can actually find one of the first mentions of ley lines in any kind of like D&D setting was first done in Greyhawk. So in Greyhawk, they did have the idea of ley lines as conduits for magic, as bleed overs from like the different realms, and just kind of like how we talk about, like, you know, how people talk about like there are like on Halloween, you know, the veil gets lifted between life and death, and there are areas that are stronger with that. Same kind of concept. There were just areas that resonated deeper that were traced to these lines. And really outside of them being conduits of magical energy, and that, of course, they just intersected the whole world. So they would just, you know, ride, you know, the landscape all the way across the planet. Outside of the lore, though, it really was just a talking point of how magic flowed and a concept of to explain magic. And occasionally you could find it referenced as allowing characters or players to pull things off that they normally wouldn't be able to. They would be used as plot points, like that's where the BBEG is siphoning the power for the ritual.
I do really like that.
You know, it could be the like you're trying to stop a cult from like blowing up one and causing catastrophe. Like they were hinted at, but again, they were more lore and setting based, kind of like we've seen before. They weren't specifically anything that they were like, hey, this is what they are, this is what they do. And that was like a lot of the stuff in the very early stages. It was just the original creators pulling out what they had done in their games before they really locked in any rules. NPC magics is the general idea. Yeah, basically.
Right.
And then a little bit later, so most of it was just in the background, and then later they did finally have something else developed in Forgotten Realms. So Forgotten Realms, after Greyhawk, did come out, and their interpretation of ley lines, same thing, right? So the same concept, wasn't a core element, but it was specifically something that was featured in the lore, either the history of a location, the history of the world itself, or just an explanation of magic. Usually it was some higher level
There wasn't
concept.
any like mechanic or anything behind it, though.
Correct. And then in Forgotten Realms, what they did was they slightly changed the narrative to the concept that in Forgotten Realms, ley lines were more of like remnants of an ancient empire. There was this what was it called, the Netherese Empire.
Netherese?
Yeah. It wasn't like the Netherverse. It was like the Netherese. It was I forget. This one was not something that I familiar with when I was gaming in Forgotten Realms, but it was basically just like an alternate plane, an alternate dimension.
Right.
And it was, you know, just kind of ancient, and I'm assuming it was the ideas of whatever happened in those catastrophic events basically like left these scars kind of concept.
Interesting.
So these were just the remnants. These were the, you know, the remnants of what was an ancient like whole dimension that people would travel to, and now all that's left of it kind of concept.
Gotcha.
So I do like that idea that they really broke away from the, you know, the normal, and it's like, again, the idea that is what's left of what a dimension could be, right? Like you imagine ruins as like a location, but imagine the ruins of what a dimension is. Like what are the ruins of a dimension is not somewhere you go, but something that you could see as like a shadow almost.
Interesting. Yeah.
The Netherrealm. Yes. I think that might have been it. Like I said, not a lot was going on in these notes. Like there's not a lot of history on this stuff. But again, in Forgotten Realms, they leaned heavily in the concept that these ley lines were basically just the sources for spellcasters. Like that's how magic flowed and how people got to tap into magic. So again, early on, they really just used it as a concept for magic. And that was only setting specific, and then beyond that, they just kind of let it go. So. That's the brief history of ley lines in D&D. There is none.
All right.
But it is good to understand that we've talked about this before on the stream. This is actually not a bad thing. Some things like this are a good example of what's better left not rules as written. You know what I mean? I don't know if I would like ley lines to have rules behind them. Having them just referenced as conduits of magic is good enough for me. You know, it's one of those ideas that it's there to let the DMs take it away. But if you start to say ley lines are this, then it kind of takes away a lot of the creativity and the mastery of what could be.
That's fair.
So, because I think we mentioned this last week or the week before, but there are just some things that are better left not in the rulebook.
Yeah, I mean, allowing for there to not be somebody that's like, oh, that's not canon, or oh, that, you know how a lot of what you have generated and created was birthed from the canon of D&D lore.
Exactly.
You know, and like the vagity that was pulled from, like, there's so much specifics in a lot of the new stuff that comes out, so much additional information for the settings, so much, like, they have shops, they have NPCs, they have stuff that's already built out for all these settings, rather than just an area for you to go mold yourself, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. So again, not a terrible lot of history, but I do like that they kept it just relatively vague, in the sense of they kept it consistent but vague, and I like that. So let's move over to what Babakis submitted to us. I think this one we can probably put up on the screen. And yeah, so we'll go over this real quick and get an idea, get a baseline of, you know, what, where we want to be in terms of the conversation with Leylines. Because a couple of the ideas that I wanted to go were more based on magical essence and the primary magic and the primary elements, but going with Babakis's mindset, it does open the ideas a little bit too.
Interesting.
So I really want to make sure that we have a good foundation before we start our conversation.
Interesting.
So, Babakis, Leylines, you have a couple things written out, but I do want to make a quick mention. You mentioned that... I said mention there a lot. So you said that you were drawing inspiration for Paraclesis, the Paraclesis alchemy. So I wanted to kind of just give a quick history lesson for anybody who's not familiar with Paraclesis. Some of the basic idea is that the element of earth is divided into the terra prima, air, water, stay, fire goes, and we add spirit as well. Oh, is that for what you're saying? Okay. Wait. Is that what you're saying? The idea of earth is divided into terra prima, air, and water.
I think so.
Stay, fire goes. Okay, gotcha. Okay, yeah. So Paraclesis Academy, just kind of giving you a quick little like Wikipedia history. Paraclesis had a more was medieval alchemist, had a mindset of I think he primarily dealt with sulfur, salt, and mercury. So this was back in the mindset of elements being more than just earth, air, fire, water. Like
right.
The ideology that these other materials were more than just solid matter and more actual elements, and I believe those were his core concepts. Sulfur, salt, and mercury were his core ideologies for all of his alchemy, I believe. Oh yeah, and then so like one of his more famous like demonstrations was burning wood, right? So the fire was the work of sulfur, smoke was mercury, and residue ash was salt. So the ideology that these were elements that could be found and anywhere, and he could pull all of that out. So interesting direction. I do like that. I like that we're gonna expand beyond the traditional. He also liked to distill plants into salts which remained when you burned away the mercury and sulfur. So, and then use the salts to heal. Okay, excellent. So yeah, so
that's way cool.
And so this is kind of like along the same lines as when medieval medicine used to believe in the humors. We used to believe that the body was balanced around humors, right? Like, so we understand, the anatomy now. We understand, what each organ does. We understand, the bodily fluids. We understand, the brain has different fluids than just blood. We know what blood does. We know what, all of it does at this point. But, at one point you had like the humors, right? Believed that, like everyone, or there was a belief that there was a balance of the four humors, which is like blood, bile, I can't remember the other two off the top of my head, but there was like four, the idea that there was four primary bodily fluids and you had to keep them in balance. This is where bloodletting came from, where if you had too much of a fluid, they would, do bloodletting. They would like just put lacerations on you and try to do that. That's where, a lot of the times they would do, other things like, insertion of fluids to balance you out. Mm-hmm. So the same kind of concept of the mindset of approaching elements in that same way, right? Believing that elements and the core of everything else were somewhere else, as long as you found, again, he found his evidence, wherever he wanted to look. But again, alchemy is kind of crazy when you didn't have chemistry to back it up, right? When you were just discovering those things at a time. I love looking at history like this because it shows you the way the human mind thinks. Like, we believe that these people was like, oh, you're so stupid because, it's like, well, we're privileged to have as much easily accessible technology and understanding as we do, right? Mm-hmm. Whereas imagine just when there was no one who understood. This guy was there going, I can explain this, and it kind of half-ass makes sense. You know what I mean? It's like that's where that idea of logic starts this, logic starts the adventure, but you have to back the adventure up with evidence. You can't just start with logic and end with logic, because anything can be logical, but logic needs to start it. You need to have that launching point, the theory. And I love watching stuff or like reading stuff like this where people had theories, and it's like, man, if I ignore what I really know, I see where you were going. It's not crazy. Like, sometimes it's crazy, and then sometimes you read this and you're like, I mean,
I know we know better now. Like, yeah.
And that's the beauty of it too. And that's why, science is a great thing, where it's like you have to take everything you hear with a grain of salt, but you also have to go kind of along with some things until you prove them wrong.
And it's cool because
there's that give and flow.
Those thought processes can lead us to other inspirations in other fields that we never would have found otherwise. Because it's like, hey, even though that thought process may not apply here, that because of that thought process makes so much sense, because that attitude, like, you can use it in other areas and it can still be a useful tool potentially.
Yeah, I love the approach and just looking at how people thought, right?
Yes.
I love how also, by the way, all of our followers, everybody that watches us is, or at least interacts with us, just loves the fucking puns. Like, I love our audience for this. So Bobicus chimes in that after, we found out they used the salts to heal. But apparently he did break away from the humors. He was still wrong in most of the ways that he believed, but he actually broke away from the thought that, during his time, the humors were believed, the balance thing. He actually broke away with that. So he wasn't a humorist. So,
really?
Yeah, he wasn't really a funny guy.
Well, you guys are ridiculous.
I love it, Bobicus. Thank you so much.
Absolutely ridiculous.
Blood, bile, phlegm, and something else. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Phlegm was one of them. There was another one though. They all had like colors, like yellow, black, I think blue, and something else. Yeah, it was crazy, dude. If you ever want to go down a weird medical history, literally just look up the four humors, and just go on that rabbit hole of reading some weird medical history of the four humors, because like I said, it was a wild time. I mean, if you want to, if you've ever heard about weird medical practices and want to know where they came from, when you start looking up when people are like, why were there leeches? Why were leeches everywhere? And go back to the humors. It's not that the humors were the core source of everything, but it's just the launching point to understand where some really weird medical stuff happened. But at the same time, it's that whole thing of as weird as it is, I mean, we wouldn't have what we have now if people didn't start doing random shit. So
and tell me that leech thing isn't a practice that we can use in other ways now today. Don't we currently use leeches to I don't know, pull out poisons or do different things?
We do use so here's actually one. This isn't really the channel for this, but I really do randomly I ADHD. I love just randomly getting info.
That's very fair.
I just randomly will stick into topics and feed off of them. So surprisingly enough, there are some medieval practices still done to this day. Very few, but like you could say that there's a lot because we've been doing surgery for hundreds of years. So yeah, it's surgery, amputations, but
it's technically yeah.
But there is a few, and there's one that stands out to me that's always just kind of interesting because it stands out to me as in it has not changed for hundreds of years. It is literally the same exact procedure. The only difference is it's more sterile now, but it is the 100% same procedure that we've done for a very long time. And they will still, trigger warning for anybody who doesn't like this, you might want to just mute for 30 seconds if you don't just listen, hearing weird things that happen, and if you don't like gross stuff, just mute for 30 seconds. But the the practice of using maggots to help burn victims and people who
to clean that stuff out.
Having that inside the wound and putting them there and just letting them do that. That's still done, and again, it's basically the same.
Do they still really do that?
Yeah, 100%. It is still done. It is still not everywhere because like skin grafts happen and everything else like that.
For sure.
But it's still a practice that hasn't really changed.
Is its purpose to clean or is it to?
So trigger warning over, but basically yes. It is instead of like scrubbing or anything else like that. It's just a cleansing process to get away like dead skin.
Interesting.
That's all it is.
Interesting.
Yeah, they eat the dead skin, but leave everything that's fine, and they're not toxic. They don't hurt you. You don't feel pain or anything. You just hopefully you're on drugs and you don't know that they just did that. You know what I mean? Like I wouldn't want to know.
It's a mental thing. It really is like.
But I mean, the same thing happens. Like high end spas do this. So if you've ever seen this, where if you go to like a high end spa, like like a multi-day spa, they'll have the minnow pools. I think they'll call them minnow pools, or whatever. Where it helps people with certain skin conditions. Where they'll go in the minnow pools, they'll put their feet in there, and the fish will come up and just it tickles because all they're doing is taking off
you see all these in like in like the jungles and stuff where there's certain like animals that kind of like work with others. Like there's certain birds that like clean out the crocodiles like food between their teeth and stuff like. There's all these like weird situations.
I mean, there's the fish that attach themselves to sharks. You know what I mean? Like so. Random tangent, but yeah. So point being,
Dungeons and Tangents.
Paracelsus had a unique idea on alchemy. Believed that there was an alternative to the main elements, and that even what we believed is the elements, like fire, was like the idea that we believe fire as an element, right? But in their mind, it's like, but fire isn't a thing. Fire is an outcome. So what's the thing that causes fire? It's like, well, sulfur is a thing. Sulfur combusts. Therefore, sulfur must be behind fire. Like, I can understand the need, because imagine, like, there's a lot of things we've discovered and just are intangible. They're hard for us to accept. I can understand someone who is intelligent for their time, who is logical, who is down. I mean, we have this conversation between you and me.
Very much so.
You were also that way, where you were just extremely logical and extremely intelligent, but put up against something that has no history, you were going to default to your logic, which isn't a bad thing to do, as long as you know that eventually you have to have evidence to back that logic up. And that's where you differ from a lot of like the ancient people, because for them, there wasn't really an easy way to produce evidence. It was like, well, I believe it. How can you prove it? Can you prove me wrong? No. Ha-ha, I win! That was literally the argument.
I think the biggest thing is, and here's honestly my stance, and it's be willing to be wrong.
Exactly.
Right?
You don't
challenge absolutely everything. If I've challenged my thing the best way that I know how, and it comes out clear, then I'm gonna keep trucking.
And that's the thing, is like for him, right? The biggest way to challenge him is if you knew more, you could be like, oh, so you believe sulfur is behind that. Well, here's an experiment where I can prove to you I have zero sulfur at all. You and I can agree this has zero sulfur. Now I can produce the same result. Your sulfur is wrong. You know what I mean? Like, unless you were just like, oh, well, there must be sulfur that we can't detect. Like, then you're just basically regressing into your own argument. But that's the difference of
it's like,
following your own logic because you have nothing better versus following your own logic because you refuse anything else, right? And I don't actually know what kind of person. I don't know enough about his history. I remember him, his name from school, but I don't know if he was one of the more arrogant. I mean, most of them were, but I don't know if he was one of the ones that like fought against anybody who contradicted him, or if he was more of the open-minded type where he was going away from the tradition because they weren't explorative enough. Because there's always those types where it's like they're either, no, I'm right and you're all wrong, and then they end up just being wackos, or there's the ones where it's more like there's got to be more, guys. Like, we can't just accept that we're done, right?
Exactly.
And I don't mind those ones because at least their heart's in the right place. It's like your science might be wrong, but you were trying to find something new, whereas you were just tired of everyone being like, well, we haven't discovered something new in 100 years. We're fine. We know everything. Like, I like that. Yeah. What up, Cosmic? Nice to see ya. Okay, so history lesson over. Trigger warnings over. So we can now get back into that. So that was the Paraclesis alchemy, the mindset behind alternative elements, which is what Baba Kiss's write-up will be more lean towards. Baba Kiss says, salt, mercury, and sulfur didn't refer to salt, mercury, and sulfur as we know it. Of course, yes. I digress as well because we've actually perfect. Thank you, Baba Kiss, for bringing that up. Let me finish your comment. They really just refer to that which doesn't burn, which is the salt, that which does, that which leaves a burning body as smoke, which is mercury, and that which burns, which is the sulfur. So not the elements of like what we would think of as like mercury residue and all of that, but alternate ideas that fire wasn't the element, it was something behind it that was. So thank you for correcting me. That was actually a good point. And then it's later that chemists pointed out that these were not really self-contained categories, and I wouldn't that Pericles fell apart. Oh yeah. So basically, once they started pointing out that these aren't really self-contained categories, which again could be why where they got the names from. Again, why we call sulfur could be similar to why he called that effect sulfur. But also, Baba Kiss points out a good point, is it actually goes back to my recent live stream, was it last Friday or the Friday before that, which was the Raw Without Lore.
Oh, yeah, it was a
and
couple
that's a
ago.
perfect example, right? When you're trying to look at something from that point of view of, I could sit here and and misquote that of saying like, he's talking about the actual minerals, the actual like physical essences, but that's not what it is. Those names don't mean the same thing to him. He says sulfur, I think the powder, I think the actual mineral sulfur. I think of salt as the mineral when it was an effect that he was describing, right? And without context, without lore, without knowing where that came from, it's easy for me to misinterpret that, misquote that, or completely go off. And same concept with, again, when you're reading a spell, because it says one thing, but is that what that thing meant when it was created?
Yes.
Because that, again, changes the concept, right? When you're trying to describe what Paraclesis was all about, if you go into it, like I was misrepresenting, if you go into it with the mindset that these things are caused by the minerals and that he believed that the minerals were always behind them, that's a whole different mindset. Like I was saying, where you could just prove that you can get the same effect without those minerals. Whereas in the reality of it, these were words he used to describe the effects. So my entire interpretation was completely wrong, and it's really just more of, instead of saying fire was an element, he was trying to say that anything that burns is that element. But then you start to divide it out, and it's like, well, that's not really a category. Things that burn and don't burn aren't really a whole essence of a category. So again, perfect example of understanding that little effect of what is the context of what you're talking about.
Amen.
Because out of context,
Amen.
It changes everything. So yeah, fantastic. Grand theory of alchemy to me is why fire makes substance change, and people explaining that over and over. I mean, yeah. And then eventually getting greedy and being like, wait, if fire can do change here, can fire do change here? And then someone else was going, you make fire do change here. And then that was just that was the ever, change into, we need to make gold, make anything into gold.
Thanks.
Yeah, no, that's actually hilarious. Is just, why did that happen? And then just people were like, what else gonna do? Why does that happen? So really self-contained. Yeah. Okay, cool. So thank you for that. So let's get into the actual background. So this is what Baba Kiss has written up so far. This is what he's created for at least his mindset and his beginnings. So not completed yet, still in the workings, but these are the beginnings of Baba Kiss's Leylines mindsets. So we're going to go into this. We'll talk about these. We'll give some of our ideas about where he's headed, especially now that we have a different mindset. So again, these are more from the mindset of these elements, things like that, can burn, can't burn, all of that mindset. Foundations.
What's it called?
Foundations.
See, I like that. I like that a lot.
All right. So we have salt, mercury, sulfur, air, water, and spirit. So those are our ley lines currently. So salt is an earthy ley line, giving power over the form of objects. Objects made of the purest salt are strong and crystalline in nature, while those made of weak salt are chalky and ashy in nature. Ooh, I am so happy you did that. Like built that mindset of really tough crystals versus like the powdery, like brittle materials. I like that you went both directions with that. That's fantastic. Mercury is an earthy ley line, giving power over the suppleness of objects. Objects made of the purest mercury are supple and light. Those made of weak mercury are brittle and hard. Interesting. It's just 6 plus weak and strong forms. Oh, it's just the 6 and weak and strong forms. That's still cool, though. Like, I do like that. Okay, so we have chalky and ashy versus crystalline. We have supple and light versus brittle and hard. Interesting. Okay, trying to build that mindset in here of what do I like. So again, going with like the Periclesis mindset of like, okay, so if these are what we're defining things as, I'm like, okay, so obviously we understand what chalk versus a crystal is. That's done. And then I'm thinking, okay, so mercury, right? So light. What is up, Mind's Eye? Hello, thank you for the lurk. So we have mercury. So what's a good example of mercury? Something that's like supple and light versus also brittle and hard. I guess that would be like certain kind of metals, right? Like when you heat metal wrong, it can either be super strong and super lightweight, but if you do it wrong with the wrong mixture.
I also think of like a rubber band.
Oh, yeah. Rubber. No, perfect. Fucking rubber band's awesome. That's such a good one.
Right?
So when it is perfectly mercury, it is a perfect rubber band. It malleables. It goes back into its shape. It can do all of that. But when it's an old crappy rubber band with crappy mercury in it, it'll be like that old crappy. It just snaps. Fucking fantastic. It just crumbles.
Yeah.
Steel is a good option too.
Oh yeah.
Steel can be like a rapier. It can be bendy and flexible, lightweight. But then you can also just have a giant, like rock.
And if you're like tempering steel wrong, and it goes from hot to cold too quickly, it can shatter and be real brittle.
Absolutely. And if you burn a rubber band, it smokes like hell. And that's So that's good. Yeah. No. That's absolutely. That's totally good. You just burn that. Yeah. Okay. So that's a good example for mercury. Sulfur is an earthy ley line, giving power over the inflammability of objects. Okay. So this is whether or not you can be lit on fire. Objects made of the purest sulfur burn intensely as charcoal. Objects made of weak sulfur sputter and burn weakly. So you have like something like the sulfur content of something like coal versus a rock, right? And then again, you're starting to think of like how those layer, right? So like if you think of like quartz, a quartz is low in sulfur, high in mercury, high in salt.
Interesting.
Because it's a quartz crystal, so it's not quite crystalline. It's not like a diamond crystal, so it's not fully salt, right? But it is high in mercury, or no, it is low in mercury. I guess it'd be halfway. High in salt because it's crystalline, but yeah, I'm just trying to think of like how you categorize things.
I do like that. It's a very interesting.
Because you got to approach like how do you define something, right? Like if it has more of this versus less of this, what are the properties that talk about it? So yeah,
that's very fair.
Oh, so it will have mercury. It's the quality. So it's not the amount; it's the quality. So something like a quartz crystal would be a decent quality, like a mid-quality salt, a mid-quality mercury, and a very, very low-quality sulfur, because basically won't burn. Okay,
that's fair.
Getting because it's hard. Okay, so yeah, perfect. And salt has no mercury. A salt that has no mercury is crumbling. Gotcha. Okay. We're getting there.
We're getting okay.
There. Okay. Air is a windy ley line. You don't say.
Indeed, it is.
It is a windy kind of wind that is windy. And those who control it use it to power airships and windmills of the world with great gales and intense updrafts. Those with power over air can divide it into portions of warm and cold air at a moment. Oh, that's interesting. Okay, so instead of like the viscosity or anything else like that, it's just more of temperature. Interesting. Side note, I know that this will probably be covered by water, but I mean, humidity probably isn't quite like the right way to go about air, but I also kind of think it is, because humidity isn't so much, it is moisture content, but in relative to like the air and the weather, humidity is more like, in my opinion, it's less about water and more about denseness. The air feels like you've been like in a
very
desert,
much so.
Like hot, dry air feels lighter, whereas thick, dense air, like it actually has a weight to it, right? Like rain on, like, again, I don't know. There's like so many different.
No, I know what you're talking about. It's very so when you're in humidity, like there's so much more moisture in the air, and the moisture is what's hot, right?
And it's thick,
and
like
it's very much so
feel
because
it.
that again, when you think about what moisture is, it's almost like it's getting closer and closer to a liquid form, which makes it thicker, which makes it more solid, which makes it more visible. Because, you have your solid form, you have your liquid form, and then you have your gaseous form. Air is supposed to be in a gaseous form, but it's so heavy, it's so thick, it's getting close to that other level. So
yeah, I would consider just maybe going with the idea that you can also change humidity with this, because I think that actually works for air in terms of like so far with what we've been hearing. But I also like that he's not forcing these to all be essences, right?
And maybe it's a combination
of
the two
of a rock, right? Where you could talk about the salt, the mercury, and the sulfur component of a material, but you're not talking about the air component. I like that. That's even though it's a ley line, it's breaking apart. Sorry, what did you say just last?
I was just saying that maybe it's maybe imagine you. We were talking a while ago about the converging of some of these ley lines. Imagine if air and water converge to be able to do a lot of stuff with like humidity, because both of them play a very valid role in that transformation.
Absolutely, yeah. Okay, interesting. So we'll see if water says anything about that, but that's just the first thing that came to my mind when reading the air one so far.
Right.
Is like, as it's been building up with these dualities, the temperature works great, but I also wouldn't mind air getting that little extra like density aspect, because the other ones feel like they go that direction as well. Convergence is important. Let's see. So water is the liquid ley line, giving power over the properties of water, especially its transition between the three stages: gas, liquid, and ice. There you go. Those with the power over water can divide it into acidic, or basic aliquotes. Am I dumb? I have aliquotes. Portion of a larger. Oh, interesting. Okay. Especially a sample taken from a chemical. Oh, okay.
I did not know that. The more you know.
Thank you. That's a new word. Aliquotes. Interesting. I don't know if maybe if I've heard it, but I've never seen it written down.
Interesting.
That's just one of those.
There are a lot of words that are like that. I'm like, I don't know what. Oh, I know that.
I wonder if it's like. I wonder if it's one of those like breakdowns, like quotient. I think of like aliquotes, quotient. So it's a portion. So I wonder if it has the same derivative.
That's
from
very
where
fair.
It came from, because that's where my mind goes with that. Okay, so they can take power over water and can divide it into acidic or basic portions as needed. That's interesting. I do like that. So again, you add air and water. If you could make air if air could make the air more dense, and then the water can make that air acidic, you could literally make acidic fog or mist just by being too powerful in both of these, or having two mages,
or just finding the right ley lines to start messing with.
Absolutely. And then spirit is the ethereal ley line, giving power to entrap and sort the spirits of the world. There are those that are harmful and those that are beneficial. Those with the power over the spirit entrap both, hiding away the harm and making use of the beneficial. So this we saw before in Bobby Kiss's showcase submittal, the Dulac dwarves and Jaquette. And in that particular case, we saw the spirit. So in that particular setting that he wrote for somebody else, we saw that. I think that's it, right? Yeah. So we saw that in that setting there was only two ley lines. There was the water and the spirit. The spirit was used to create golems, like, these guardians, and combining the spirit and the water ley lines gave you spirit water, which is allowed them to trap souls into the. I think that's what you did, right, Bob? Because it's the spirit water was used to trap the souls from the spirit ley line into the golems to animate them. And the water could do a whole bunch of stuff like pH, balance, like you had a ton of stuff there that it could do, which was like awesome. And The spirit one was mainly, and then you had like so he, you could trap the spirits that you wanted as your guardians, and then you could also make the spirit mazes, which either the spirit maze was either to help you trap them, or the spirit maze was used for the evil ones that you don't want. Like
I think I remember that.
So excellent. So kind of building all of this. So let's talk about our ideas so far with what he's done before we get into the surprise, because this is fascinating. So out the gate, I like the alternative of, instead of explaining this through just the basic standard, 4 elements, going into the idea that, we don't even have fire here. We have the idea of things that can be lit on fire and can't be. But we don't even have fire, right? It's like, it's like we have earthy like items, but we don't have earth. We don't have fire. We have air, water. We have 3 that are characteristics, but they're not elements, which I'm just trying to build this new concept in my brain. And I'm liking this approach because it gives you a different way to build something, right? It gives you a different balancing. Instead of an elemental effect deciding, like if you wanted to create a world around this where your players were building stuff, if you imagine it in a sense of, hey, if you want to build an item, you could say, based on the expense, right? Because we talk about, like in D&D, like, certain gems have to be a certain price before you can imbue them with certain magical abilities and do certain enchantment, right? Like things that have a certain value. So if you had a system based around this, where, say, players wanted to create an item. So first they have to set the item's value. They have to get an item or craft something of a certain value, right? That would give you a baseline of points. Maybe, 10% of its value, or, whatever is how many points, or, 1% of its value. So for every 100 gold, you can put like 1 thing in it or something like that, right? Or 1,000 gold, however you want to do it. So like for every 100 gold, you get 1 point. And for every point, you have to decide, and there's a minimum, right? Like a minimum of 6 points. So everything has to be $600 minimum, right? So there's your bare minimum. Nothing can be imbued with that's less than 600. And it's like, for every 100, it's a point. So any amount over that, any amount of gold over that, 100, any 100 amount over that, you get more points. So let's say you put 1,000 gold into this item. You get 10 points. 6 minimum, but 10 points. And those 10 points have to be distributed through all of these characteristics. So you have to have at least 1 point in all 3. But a bare minimum of 6 points to make an item, right? So you have 1 sulfur, 1 mercury, 1 salt. And that's the grade. Because like what he was talking about is it's the purity of it.
Yes.
So let's say a grade of 10 is the highest purity, and a grade of 1 is the lowest purity. So when you want to create an item, and you put, let's say, the minimum in, which is 6 points, you're going to have 1 of each, but then you get to add up to 3 more points for the minimum item. But if I put in 1,000, now I get to add in 7 more points, and I get closer. I could put all of that into salt.
Interesting.
But that's going to give me 8 salt, which is going to make it really crystalline. But it's also going to be a 1 mercury, 1 sulfur. So it's not going to have any like fire properties, and it will be brittle and hard. But it will be crystalline in nature, and it'll be strong. So it'll be brittle and hard, but strong. So like a rock that could like shatter, right? So I can't.
So if you're able to overcome its strength, it will shatter.
Something like that.
But like others who are less inclined, if you're able to overcome its strength, it might just crack, which would make it much easier for you to repair later. So depending on which points you put into what, it's like, hey,
and the more expensive it gets. So that at that point, if you had all 3, and let's say you'd have limitations. You can't have them maxed out. If one's maxed out, the others get a cap of like. So it's like if one reaches 10. The others are maxed at 7, and then once the next one reaches 7, the last one's maxed at 5. Whatever calculations like you would think is that. But so 8 salt, 1 mercury, and 1 sulfur might be flammable glass. See, I'm trying to understand.
Interesting.
So 8 salt would make it more crystalline. So there's the glass. But mercury makes it brittle. There's the glass. Sulfur. Objects made of weak sulfur burn. So the lower the sulfur number, the less it burns. Yeah. So,
The less the sulfur, the easier it burns.
Oh, objects made of purest sulfur burn intensely. So wouldn't low sulfur, like low purity of sulfur,
Sputter and burn weakly.
So yeah, so it would be glass and it might be slightly flammable, but it wouldn't like erupt, right? So yeah, so that would be kind of really interesting if you had a mechanic, poor flammability. So if you had a mechanic, right, where if you wanted to create a magical item, you had to put so much gold into it to be allowed so many points, and then you had to decide how many points of each of these categories you wanted to put into this item, and then Bobicus or the DM would do something like this. He'd be like, okay, well, you want this much, this much, this much, or the player would be like, hey, I think it's going to be brittle, and it's going to do this, and it's going to be flammable, but it's going to look like, like glass, or maybe they're like, oh, it's going to be like glass, well, can I make it, I'm trying to think of like what's an alternative, but like, it's like, oh, well, can I do this instead? Like, there would be really interesting ideas to be had to like work with players that want to be creative. So that would be just an idea for you, Bobby Kiss, of taking this and running with it in that idea, because going about this way with properties of items, I think is also more interesting, because instead of saying, you could even like Bobby Kiss, you could even go so far as to create a secondary category list of what magical effects fall within each category. So in the sense of, you've already said like the water category has like, the acid and everything. So if you had, again, if I had an item I wanted to create, if I had the salt, the mercury, the sulfur, and then air, water, and spirit were also points I could put in, right? Let's say I wanted something to be acidic, so I would have to like be able to put water points into it so I could turn it like acidic. Mm-hmm. So things of that nature, of being able to like, instead of saying I want a dagger that does poison damage, I have to make a dagger that has the points in the categories to make it acidic and poisonous, right? Like, it would have to go in that direction. So I kind of like that approach. So essentially, you're using this point system to say, I want to do this, and then Bobby Kiss would be like, okay, you're going to need 3 points in this, 4 points in this, and 10 points in this to get that. And then so your mindset is, okay, I have to get that much gold,
right?
And I have to get these materials to then go build this item, right? Because you're not saying, I want this magic spell. You're actually having to craft specifically what effect you want.
Now, is there a way to basically guarantee an effect, or is everything an experiment?
Ooh. Bobby Kiss, what do you think? If we're going off of this idea that you were going to build an item and you were letting your players do that, how would that work out? Would you say it should be more on the DM to take in what the player's trying to do, take in the numbers, and do it like what you just did for me? Kind of come up with your own idea of, oh, you'd make flammable gas with that? Or do you think it would be more of the player states what they want and you just give them a set of numbers to shoot for? Really curious. Yeah. Wasn't really making a crafting system, but I can see some guaranteed effects. Okay. Yeah, we're just playing around with the idea here, just more of a, like how could this work, and what it inspires.
Because again, a lot of this stuff eventually, like, because what I look at when I look at a lot of this stuff is it's all a foundation, right?
Yeah.
And it's all just, like you said, like what people could or something like that. Imagine this was in one of the source books. This is it. This is what was in the source books. You had this information. You just had a little bit of basic stuff right here. And then a lot of people can go and do what you and I are doing right now and start putting mechanics on top of it. Start being able to create magic systems, magic items around it. Like, just start building things out of the root of this.
So again, he wasn't even thinking about crafting. So that means that, again, this is ley lines. These are magical ley lines. These are imbuing things with these properties. We were just thinking about items, right? We were just thinking about this as like the construction of magic. But no, dude, think about this. Forget crafting. That means that in this setting, like barbarians, when they rage, they pull from the Mercury ley lines. Right? Like the idea that if you think about it, they rage, they become resistant to certain damages. It's harder to damage them with piercing, with slashing damage, right? That's because if you think about it, the Mercury ley line is giving the ability to be supple and brittle like a wizard, or if you have a pure connection and flow to that Mercury ley line, you're going to be purist. Or I guess not brittle and hard, but salt. Sorry, not Mercury. So the barbarian would have a very strong connection to the salt ley line because the purest salt is strong and crystalline in nature, which is why he's slash resistant, right?
Interesting.
So
I really like that.
So because you're looking at these as ley lines, what do they feed? If we're not talking about physical construction, what do these ley lines actually feed in the world? And it has to explain how things have these magical properties. Why do barbarians rage? Wizards obviously have, they don't have a very strong connection because they're really, they're glass cannons, right? So the idea of what ley lines you're connected to based on your class, I think is also a direction to think about what does that mean? Because, these ley lines,
right,
they're the flow of magic and the flow of things that are happening that obviously would explain, instead of saying, oh, you're just connected to that plane of magic, it's what ley line connection do you have? What combo is working for you? And then you could play off the idea that if you're nearer the ley line that you're the most attached to, your effects get boosted. Like if a barbarian's within 100 feet of an active ley line, they get immunity instead of resistance.
Interesting. That would be crazy.
You know what I mean?
That would be very cool.
Directly off of that ley line. Interesting. Yeah, that just another idea. So let's see. So Bobicus is going to correct us. It says no. So the whole thing about this is that this is NPC magics. You have to attune to ley lines to be affected by them. Okay. So this is just more of areas that you can specifically pull off of.
Interesting. When I say NPC magics, what is that supposed to mean?
Yeah, that's actually a good question. When you say NPC magics, are you just saying these are more for things that players are to see and experience narratively, but isn't really a mechanic that's meant for them to interact with? In the idea of the dwarves and the Jaquette. That was more of they have specific people who have learned how to use the ley lines for these purposes narratively. They created the spirit water, they created the golems, but it's never meant for the players to learn. The players aren't there to learn how to use the ley lines. They're not going to be able to create a class and use that magic. They're not going to be able to stick around and abuse the source of those ley lines. The idea is that the lore is that these people learn how to do it over time, and it's just that's how they can do it. You know what I mean? Just because you're here in an adventure doesn't mean you have access to it. It just means it's
right.
So NPCs can always do more than the PCs can in story. The world must be more magical than the players to create an interesting world. So the idea is that it's almost, I don't want to say this in a derogatory way, but almost like dangling the carrot, right? It's that idea that there's always something in the distance to continue striving for. Right. That whether or not you can achieve it, it's there to keep you going.
The only reason I associated with this anime is because it's the first time I saw it so vividly, but I almost kind of look at it like the Hunter x Hunter effect. Because as I'm going through the seasons of Hunter x Hunter, you get introduced to this power system called Nen, and it's really cool, and you have all these awesome abilities, and then you get to the end of one of the seasons, and then you realize you've barely scratched the surface of what's even out here.
Yeah.
Right? And so there's so much more out there. And so I guess the idea is there's so much more that's potentially more powerful than these players out there that it gives them something to be oh, I want to go get that powerful, or whatever the case may be.
And Baba Case gives us more too. So the idea is that, again, in order to help solidify why some NPCs end up being more powerful than players, right? How do you narratively justify? Because we always talked about that before, right? We don't have anything in our settings, in our realms, that players can't achieve. Everything they see is if it's there, it exists. If it exists, it exists. The whole point is if it exists, you can get to it.
Exactly.
You just may not have access to it. If it's a god power, you have to become a god. But if there's gods, that means that they exist. That means you can become one, right? The idea
you can figure it out if you're really trying to.
And so with Babakis, it's more of that, how do you explain that these NPCs will have things that you won't allow the players? And so the ley lines are those examples. The idea that these super powerful people have to stay in one spot, attuned to these ley lines, have certain prerequisites, and adventurers can't do that because they're constantly on the move. They're constantly doing things. Like, adventurers aren't going to make a campaign where they sit for 10 years attuning to a ley line to do one thing that will no longer be necessary because they're no longer adventurers, right? Like, absolutely makes sense. And I like this approach because normally we're not really big fans of like road blocking in terms of that, but I also understand when you need to, like when you need to narratively have something that the players can't have, or when you just need to say someone can do something. Like, we always talk about consistency, and this is a beautiful way to make that consistency. When you want to lock
you
players
set yourself
away
up
from
for
things,
it.
Absolutely. That's the really key thing here is it's one thing to say, I don't want players to have access to something, but I need it to happen in my game. It's one thing to want that and just flat out be like, yeah, no, you guys can't do that. It just exists for me. Versus actually having something constructive and basically in the way of the players that they can't get around. And I mean that by, I'm going to put a barrier that literally will make you playing this game obsolete if you want to go down it. Like, he's not saying they can't technically do it, but it would take 50 years in game. And guess what?
And you'd sit here right here at this spot and do absolutely freaking nothing.
So let's fast forward. Now you're old. Now you're attuned to the ley line. What did you want to do again? Why did you want to do that 50 years ago? Well, you're not an adventurer anymore. Like, there's so many ways to go around the idea that you're going to literally break the game by going down that path. And that's not the worst way to do it. I've seen a lot worse ways. The worst way is just to say outright no and not have any reason behind it. But this is also an easy roadblock that maintains consistency.
Very fair.
Because as long as it's always tied with the ley lines, that rule will always apply. You guys can't tie yourself to the ley lines because you don't have enough time. You can't. And it's not that you can't because I'm saying you can't. It's you can't because then there's no game. And
exactly.
That's
and we don't want that. You guys don't want that, right?
Exactly. And that's a barrier I'm okay with because in the end, it's that subtle manipulation of, I'm not telling you no, but I'm making sure you think it's your idea not to go after it.
Lightweight.
You know what I mean? It's just I'm making you believe it's your idea because I don't want to tell you no, but you're not doing it.
But that's not what's going down.
Let's see. So adventurers don't know how to tune to the ley lines because they travel too much. And apparently, so adventurers can learn how to manipulate the weave, but that's different than manipulating ley lines. So I'm also very interested, and I like the fact that you're doing that you actually have a separation between like magic and the ley lines. Like, the actual ley lines are a little bit of a, I guess, more concentrated source, whereas manipulating the weave is like almost manipulating their byproduct, you know. Hoilepa, what is going on? Good morning. Yes,
that's right.
It's always weird because Hoilepa will join in my gameplays sometimes, and it's like I'll play way earlier, and I'll be like, wait a minute. Normally it's morning, but then I'll have to do the math, and I'm like, isn't it like 1 o'clock in the morning right now? So it's like sometimes.
Hoilepa, do you ever sleep, or is this just
I don't know.
Perpetual.
I think Hoilepa just it's 5:40 a.m. right now on a Saturday. Why are you? Oh yeah, but you work, so you just probably are just up because you're up. That happens. Holy crap, we got 5 of y'all in chat, or not chat, but 5 of y'all viewing right now. Thank you guys so much. We appreciate that. That's awesome. So I like this approach. Like I said, I'm really enjoying the approach of alternatives and going away from the standard, elements and going with more of these categories. I really appreciate this idea. So before we get any further too, other than the spirit water, have you come up with any other ideas? Have you come up with any other combinations? Because that is one of the other things that I wanted to think about too, is what else other than spirit water, once we came up with what do the other ley lines do, and what are their purposes, what other combinations happen? Let's see. Hoilepa just woke up, somewhat reasonable sleep rhythm. Hey, that's good. Glad you're getting somewhat of a rhythm now. That's great. So, okay, so no other combinations, just these foundations. Okay, so yeah, so I love these foundations. I think these are great. I love the idea that you're going for a category of what NPCs can do. So if I understand correctly, if this isn't so much a explanation for how the flows of works, like like the idea of that's where the barbarian gets that power, and if it's not so much like how to create items, then are these just more or less like when you want to create a location like you did with the jaquette, or if you want to create, like if you want to have the justification to create a certain weapon or an artifact, is that kind of the idea too, is to use these ley lines to help better build basically things that you want to have in there, and you need that direction of, well, how did someone create this? Like, this is way more powerful. And it's like, oh, one person who had an attunement with a ley line.
Right.
They were able to create it. Yes. Okay. So locations mostly, and a magical world filled with ley lines. Gotcha. Okay.
Ooh, imagine someone building a forge over a ley line.
Building a forge over a ley line would be dope as fuck.
Yeah,
right? Like being able to, yeah. So I do like
crazy.
that. Again, this isn't really supposed to be a mechanic that's usable. This is mainly the lore mechanic. So I even like that even more, that it's more for the DM than it is for the players. And this is a unique, I don't want to say skill set. This is a unique technique though that I've never really thought about, but I think I've used this in similar ways, where building consistency, or I guess I have used this a lot in a lot of different ways, but building things that you can be consistent with yourself, right? Building something like this, where again, this isn't for the players to keep track of. The players may understand the lore. They may understand that certain things came from certain ley lines. They may, interact with people who are tuned with certain ley lines, but it's not meant for them. It's meant to help explain if they have questions, just like my hierarchy of deities and my hierarchy of the weave versus the source, and how the hierarchy of like the endless versus the primordials versus the zenith versus the saints, right? Like how all of that hierarchy, most of that is available to players, but it does not matter. The players do not need to know that in order to play, and it does not do them any good outside of roleplay purposes, right? But being able to being able to have explanations and have a ready go-to resource to be like, hey, this is one of the reasons why I've said I like using pop culture. I love using pop culture references as influence, because it's easy for me to remember that shit, because that's what I'm interested in, right?
As a player, it very much helps you to better immerse yourself in the world that you're in. And it's like, when I'm playing in your games and I can recognize something from session to session, and I can be like, oh, I understand how and why that works. Oh, this is flowing this way across this river because I understand that these currents mix these ways, or whatever the case may be. It's like being able to like piece things together and like understand how things function is very, very valuable in a setting like this. And so that's again why I'm super here for it.
We had a question I overlooked. I think Koilepa, or no, Babakiss had a question that
Koilepa.
Okay. So
asked about.
This was like, so back when, like, what happens when you're not near leyline territory. So I was saying, like, imagine like if you explain, like, let's say a barbarian, the reason they rage is like the Mercury ley line, like they're just attuned with it, or just they have a more natural attunement, and you could say, hey, the closer you are, the
more powerful it is.
But then there's the question of, well, what if there's like none around? And I'm like, well, depending on how you build the world, that could be kind of cool, because what if certain classes lost certain abilities? Like, what if you are in such a remote area, so far away from a landline, which, ley line, that they may or may not be that rare or often, but what if those areas are devoid of those types of magic? Like, what if a barbarian can't rage in those areas? Like so you could have certain areas that like certain classes have to avoid, or certain classes are worse off or better off.
I almost like the idea of, like, say a certain ley line of its opposition, or say a certain ley line, like if you're in a really powerful area of another ley line, like it's really hard for you to connect to your source because you're completely surrounded by this other power.
That could be just like it's just in general it's overpowering. So that just it was a little side comment just when we were going off on that, but I remembered I wanted to get that.
I like that.
Let's see. So there was other comments. Leylines of an air means airships are possible, but they can't go everywhere. So that's good too. Again, like there's limitations, but there are ideas out there.
That would be sick. Imagine like there's like this like blimp route that just follows a ley line, and it just goes back and forth between two different cloud cities that are over.
So and if they drift off, like you won't die, but if you drift out of the ley line, you would just float down, right? You would just like
imagine
go,
that.
Like, glide.
Okay. So there's this ley line that goes throughout, and crisscross over here there is earth ley lines, and so where the air and earth ley lines meet, there is a cloud city, a huge floating island above the center of this ley line, and in these two different areas, and then this
I like that. Like again, because
that's
Bobby
crazy.
was saying like locations. That would be a dope ass location where if you had like the air.
I want to make that so bad now.
That's kind of dope. I like that. I love floating cities. I've done a couple myself, and but that idea on like the intersection of a ley line, that's awesome. And then Hoylepa said, could ley lines help with specific schools of magic? So again, because this is in the original mindset with Bobby Kiss, it was more of a help explain how the world works and help explain a way why certain things exist that the players just don't have access to. But I think that it's very easy that you could allow this to help with certain schools of magic, right? Like you could easily, even if like Bobby Kiss, even if you just wanted to say, hey, it's just for NPCs, it's just for me to explain things, but because they're so prominent, if you're within 100 feet of an actual ley line, and you're like a mundane person that's not attuned, or maybe if you're if you have to be, maybe even just say you have to be on top of it. You basically have to be standing on top of an actual ley line if you're not attuned to one to draw power from it. And just say that all it does is give you like a +2 to something. Like maybe it gives you advantage or a +2 to hit, or maybe it gives you an extra D6 on damage for magic, right? Like you could add a very tiny, for the school of magic, right? Like you could just add a very tiny boost to something if you happen to find yourself on a ley line, but it's not even that the players are doing anything. It's just a byproduct of the ley lines. Just
byproduct of their exist. I think like the best thing for something like that is just like kind of like a +1 magic weapon. It's just a passive +1 that you just get.
To anything that's related to that ley line.
Just
again, it's nothing that the players can manipulate or do anything with, but it's for everything. Everything on that line just boosts up.
Interesting.
Yeah. So one of those ideas. So we have, going with those. So that I'm trying to think of anything else that I can think of, because this went in a slightly different direction than I was thinking.
Fair.
But as a premise of being able to explain what's happening, and again, I got to give you credit for going into a new area and coming up with a new style of categorization. I think that is going to just lead to more creative insights from you, right? Like, again, because it's not for your players, it's not for the mechanics, it's not for doing anything in game. By approaching it this way, I think you won't get as burned out as a lot of DMs do, trying to feel like you need to come up with like new and creative items. Because how hard is it, honestly, how hard is it? You could say, how hard is it to create a magical weapon? I'm like, honestly though, how hard is it? Like, how have you ever tried to create a brand new dagger? Not just one that looks different, but have you ever tried to honestly sit down and create a dagger?
Something that's never been created before?
Like, anytime I sit down and go, I want to create something new, the moment I start writing anything else, I get the little voice inside my head from South Park that just screams, Simpsons did it. Because every single time I'm thinking like, oh, this would be cool. What if it did this? I get that little Simpsons did it. And then I look it up and I'm like, yep, there it is. Like in Xanther's Guide, or there it is in Tasha's Cauldron, or oh, there it is on D&D Beyond. Like you're not going to create and unless it's just absurd, unless it's a 1d20 dagger, you're not going to create something brand new, right? Like it's been outdone, right? We've had poison daggers, fire daggers, acid daggers, wind daggers, water. We've had them all. We've had daggers that change time. We've had daggers that change reality. Like, in that essence, you're just going to reflavor something, right? You're going to take an ability of something that you've seen created and reflavor it. And I know that a lot of DMs get burnt out, right? They try to feel like, hey, I want to finally create something that's not from a book, right? I want to create something that's unique to my world, my setting, my players. But in the end, you end up struggling because it's like, man, what feels different, right? I mean, think about what it took. Think about how long that campaign took for Kintsugi's Resolve to be a thing.
Yeah.
Right? So Simpsons did... Simpsons did say that too. So it's one of those things where it's like, when you want to create something new and you don't want to get burned out on feeling like you're just taking something that's already been done and slapping it in on a new skin, this is going to be a helpful tool to really approach it differently. Because you have a different category, you have different ways of thinking about magic. You're no longer creating a magical dagger with XYZ spell, that's cast 3 times per day. Mm-hmm. Now you're actually thinking, well, if this thing has a hardness and a brittleness, and I can only max out like one of these, right? So if I max out its strength, that's great. But does that also mean that it's going to be supple and light? It has to be supple and light if it can't, so it won't be brittle. But maybe that also means that it's like it can't, you have to really like approach it from a different mindset of it can't just do XYZ. I have to think, can that even be possible? Like, if you say, I want this dagger to do XYZ, but then you're like, well, wait a minute, that would mean it would need a 10, 10, and a 9. Is that even possible? Can you have a material that's that pure in all 3 things? Because you probably couldn't. And then you get to the question of, how do you make the purity, right? Is it out of 100%, or can each one have a different amount, right? So it's like,
interesting.
It's that mindset of, because these are ley lines, right? They're not physical materials, right? How do they actually get imbued, right? Are they just magical? Are they physical in nature? Are they natural in nature? Or do they have to be manipulated by the person that's attuned, right? These are all questions that will constantly give new and unique ideas, instead of just, well, I have a weapon and I have a list of magical effects. Which combo hasn't been used yet? This is literally going to create new concepts to deal with. And that's what I think is going to create more and more unique ideas as you develop the Leylines concept. So I guess the question is, what would you like to see this go for homebrew review? Where would I like to see this go for homebrew review? Well, I guess that's more of a question for you. If you're interested in submitting for like a homebrew review, I love what you have written up here in terms of like ley lines as a magical concept. If you wanted to finish up, I should probably show you what I say. If you wanted to finish this up and just like nail down all of what you want to say about each one, I would say submit something like this. That's basically giving us a brief description of like what ley lines are. They're for NPC use. They're to help me explain why the players can't do certain things. And then just very much like this, bullet point out what each one does, maybe give a couple examples, or, just flesh out some of the ideas of what they're used for, what kind of NPCs would be using it, and anything that you want to add. And then we could rate just that. We could rate the idea of ley lines as a concept, because that would be it, right? You would be basically submitting, here's an idea for people to use ley lines in their world. Because I'm starting to realize that we want to split homebrew review into 2 sections. We want to do homebrew review and homebrew showcase. And showcase is more for when people want to just show off something that they've built, they're proud of, and they just want to hear our reaction to it. Like, again, what we did last time with the Goblin City is it was more of our reaction of how would we feel as players walking into this. So if you wanted this to be a showcase, you could submit it in homebrew review, and it could be as a showcase, and we would just display it out once you're all done and give you our ideas as if we were players walking into this world. What questions would we have? How would we react? What things we'd be worried about? What things we'd be excited for? That would be the showcase. Or you could submit it for a homebrew review and just try to make it more about specifically what the ley lines do, and we would rate that as a bundle pack. Like if someone wanted to say, hey, I love the idea of ley lines, I want to use that, then again, I would give it the homebrew review of how likely I would be to use your ley line ideas in High Point. So up to you. I would say you decide if you want it to be more of a would I use it in High Point. So I give you a High Point review. And again, we might be more critical in terms of like the feedback, because I would be more directed in on either what I currently do or what I would be more likely to do with it before I would accept it. Mm-hmm. Whereas the showcase, it's more about what do I want to play with instead of what would I change. And that's really the big difference. Homebrew review is more about what I would change. Showcase is more about what I want to do with it. What questions do I have? What am I afraid of? Where would I rabbit hole, as a player? What things do I grasp at? What immediately entices me? So it's a little bit of a different type of approach. And that's the direction that we kind of want to go. So I'm going to leave that up to you. You let me know when you're done writing this up, how you want it presented. And then we'll present it like that. Still will be in the same channel. It'll still be in the
submissions.
Yeah, in the submissions channel.
Okay.
Just in this particular case, just let me know, showcase or review, and that's how we'll approach it.
Cool.
And then more in chat. Most swords are made of composite construction, supple in the middle and hard on the edges. Yeah, see, again, that idea of construction, right? So it's like, because these are ley lines, right? These aren't about the mindset of every little thing, right? It's not like how every material works. But if you're going to create a magical weapon, right? And you want it to be a +2 sword that maybe does, certain types of damages. The idea of thinking, well, it needs not break, so I need the middle to be a different piece. I need the outsides to be a different piece. The handle needs to be of a different, that's that kind of concept of, maybe making, the handle more heavy. So it's like the blade seems to move faster because you're all in the wrist instead of top heavy. So again, you can make it more of that like salt. So it's like you add more salt into the blade to make it more fast, but then you add it so it's not brittle. Mm-hmm. So just it makes you approach it instead of just saying, well, it's a short sword. There's the stats. Like here's the stats for the short sword in the book.
Yeah.
This is actually talking about how are you going to make it? Like this ley line, when you bring it in, it's going to change the properties of the weapon. So you have to add in this other ley line to, like you were talking about, right? You bring in one ley line and well, now it's becoming more brittle. Well, now I need to bring in this other ley line because this will harden it, right? Like you have to manipulate each piece. I love it. It's so much better. It's so much more tactile than just saying, I have a $500 dagger that has fireball on it.
Yes.
Like it's more tactile because you have to really think through what you want. And Balka says, you rate based on how you would use them. What does your world need? So in terms of High Point,
need.
Yeah, that's the thing.
It's a hard word.
And that's why I kind of do homebrew review the way I do, is because it's not so much like I'm never looking for stuff at High Point. Like I'm at that point now where High Point has so much, I don't actively look for stuff anymore. But that's why like the 10 out of 10 is I would say hard to achieve, but it's actually been achieved quite a few times.
Stuff finds you.
Exactly. The idea that the reason why the very first point I take off is whether or not I can or would use it in High Point. Like that's the first thing that comes off of the 10 out of 10 is because I have so many things that it's very difficult for someone to present an idea to me that isn't already either represented in High Point or has a very close clone. Right? Like someone might come like I use ley lines, but not like this. This is great. And I do like this concept, but the idea of manipulating a material, I have more I would say more material, prime material plane physics. So in the essence of I have mechanics built into High Point to where if you wanted to create a custom sword that wasn't just out of the book, a short sword, right? Because I look at
anything things, like alchemy?
Yes. It's basically blacksmithing, but you can get that's why proficiencies. You can keep taking blacksmithing and learn more and more and more. Just like Doft, you learned in bending that the more you take, we've talked about your list, the more you take, the more you understand things on a structural level. Like you're going to get to the point to where you can shape things roughly, but then you get to an understanding where I'm like, I can make a lattice structure. I can make this thing almost indestructible based on how I manipulate the atoms, right? Like that's the idea. So I love this concept. I mean, this is such a cool way, but in like, if you were asking like for high point, this doesn't really suit what I need because I have a different mechanic that players can work with in terms of getting the same exact effects, right?
The same things,
the idea
the
of
same
being,
thing would happen in a different.
The reason, the way I explain it, so like a perfect segue. So like the way that I explain that in High Point is when you look at something from the book, whether it be a item from a store, like a weapon, whether it be just a regular like crafting item, whether it be a spell, I look at those as, if they don't have a name, if they're just like, dagger, short sword, those are quite literally the bottom of the barrel. Those are the most mass-produced versions. So the dagger that's in the book, that 1d4 dagger that's in the book that weighs, 1 pound or whatever, that is the most easily produced dagger. Now, you can say that it looks different, it looks more like a stiletto, it looks kind of more like a curved blade. Like, there's all those things, but when you want to have a dagger that's like, I want the dagger from the book, that's just like any blacksmith you go to can knock out a dagger like that. In a couple hours, couple days. Mm-hmm. Like, that's nothing special. That's why it's in the book. That's why it's everywhere. It's literally any local blacksmith will build it. Whereas if you wanted something that like does something different, right? Like, hey, I want a dagger that when I stab somebody, it causes bleeding because both sides are actually either serrated, or I have a double-edged dagger, or it's a tri-point. Those are things that players can create. But those are things that now you either need a specialist and you'll pay big bucks for that, yes, or you need to go and learn the proficiencies in order to understand what you're doing.
To do that in that type of detail.
I've had, like, let's say you want to do a dagger that has like, that's good against, let's say like lycanthropes, like werewolves. So you might want a dagger, you can make one completely made out of silver. You can make one silver coated. You can make one that's silver tipped, or you can make one that has a silver core that has a coating, like a steel coating on the outside to make it a full dagger, but every time you sharpen it, it sharpens into a blade of silver. So the whole blade is a normal steel blade, but every time you sharpen it, because you're taking the outer coating out, it's silver on the inside. So you're doing the silver damage, even though it's doing the normal steel blade damage, right? Those are things that I think about, but those are effects that they can get via magic or via just actual physics by learning the right skill sets. So, long-winded way of saying, like, it's hard for me to say what do I need. It's just that whole thing of like, when things hit me and strike me, and just I just know. I'm just like, I hear it and I'm just like, that needs to go into High Point. That's not currently there. And that's really the hard thing, is like finding something that's missing in High Point is just because I've been building it for over 10 years. It's more like I have to stumble across what's missing. So yeah, if you're looking to help me add to High Point, the best way to do that is just submit ideas. Like, just submit your stuff, yes, and eventually something's going to resonate with me, and it'll work out. Like, I love this. It does inspire me, but I don't know if I would change how my current ley lines work off of this. But it does give me, like, as a player, I want to fuck with this. Like, I would fuck with
I
this
want to play
so
in this.
Much.
Yes,
like,
badly.
And that's the big difference, right? That's why the review and the showcase are completely different approaches. Review is more about how I approach it as a DM, which is why I suggest changes for my particular setting. But the showcase is a totally different mindset, because the showcase isn't about me thinking what can make it better. It's about me walking into this going, this is what I have to deal with. This is the setting. What am I excited about? Where do I want to take it? What kind of character would I want to build? What would be the most interesting thing about this for me? What is the least interesting thing, right? Because that's a big deal for a DM. If you create all this stuff, but you don't realize what the least entertaining thing is, you might spend too much time on that. If you get that real gut feeling of like, yeah, this is cool, but I just don't care. I want to go over here, right? That's the feedback that I like to hear, like, especially after gaming sessions. It's like, hey, cool. Like, what'd you guys like? What'd you guys dislike? Okay, like, but what got you guys excited and what got you guys really bored? Like, those are great feedback questions, because instead of, it's not about like, where did I do wrong? It's just more of a what wasn't entertaining. Could have just been that conversation. That one guy just didn't have the information we wanted, or that whole shopping thing was boring, or that fight was really boring. Like, so many different things can actually like give you insight on what your players are interested in. So that's why I do like the new showcase, is because it's a different mindset that I don't normally discuss with you guys. Is how would I approach it if I were to play this and I were to have to create a character and use these as my mechanics. So I don't know if that answered your question. I know that was a lot, but
no, I definitely feel that.
I don't know. I don't know what I'm looking for. I don't know where this would go. I think this would be personally a better showcase because I think that at this point you've gotten a lot from us. I also think that you're already on an amazing direction, and I think it would be better to give you feedback from someone who is interested in using it from a player point of view and highlighting the things that are attractive and not attractive. I think that would help you more now than trying to tell you as a fellow DM, well, in my setting, this is what I would do, and I would change this and I would change that, because it's nice, it's helpful, kind of like what I did in Discord, right? I gave you a bunch of ideas of like, you know, what I would do with like the aberration thing. Or no, that was his board.
Oh yeah,
that was his
true.
board.
But I think you did. Talk about Leylines at some point in there as well. But
yeah, the mindset being is like, I think that would be more helpful because it would highlight what you're already up to. I think at this point, if you submitted it for a high point review, like a homebrew review, the problem is you're already going in such a unique direction that isn't high point that it wouldn't do it justice to tell you what I would do differently, because that's kind of what we're doing here today. Like, there wouldn't be a whole lot of difference. I'm giving you ideas of what this has inspired me to do, and when we get to the surprise here at the end, you'll see a little bit more like of the inspirations of with the direction I would have taken it. But I think you're going on a great path. I don't want you to go away from this. I want you to continue with this because you're creating something that's unique, it's new, and it's intriguing, and I want to know more about what you come up with, but I personally just wouldn't want to tell you what I would do differently, because that to me is boring. You're creating something brand new, and it's not like you're trying to appeal to me. I don't know. How, am I explaining this well?
I know exactly what you're talking about. Yes.
It's just like, it's
I don't want you to cater it to what I would put in my world. I want you to develop this in the way that makes the most sense to your mind. You know, we can give you our input about how we feel about it. But
I guess the other thing too is homebrew review is slightly more about balancing. You have such a great idea, and we haven't even brought up balancing because it hasn't been a point. Like, it hasn't been a point of contention. Like, everything makes sense. We haven't once mentioned that this is out of balance.
There isn't. We don't have enough detail yet. There isn't anything to balance. Like, we started getting into, hey, 100 gold, and you get 1 point, and then you need a total of 6 points. Yeah. If there was some of that foundation here, that could get balanced. We could talk about balancing that, but this is just the root. This is a seed that is about to blossom into something phenomenal.
I really want to see where this goes without trying to, because and you know, again, I also think it might be just not a moot point, but I'm approaching it much more from a D&D point of view, like a much more classic D&D point of view. Mm-hmm. And I like where this is going because it's going into more of the custom tabletop RPG level of a mechanic. And I like that more because my levels are much more revolving around like the traditional elements, and this is going in a direction I like so much more. Like, not more as in I want to use it more, but more as in this deserves to be its own thing. Mm-hmm. I don't want this to default into what we've always seen. I want this to continue to be brand new. So sorry, that was probably more than you needed for that particular question, but I don't know. Sometimes I still haven't figured out exactly how, if we've really
it's good to work it out.
Yeah.
It is.
I just, it's that whole thing of like really representing what D&D Discussions is about, what Misfit Gamer Studios is about, and just trying to make sure, have we really like formulated our ideas yet? Like, what is our overarching plot here? Yeah. So hoping that
we do all right. I think we do all right.
I think so too. We're trying. Hoylepa back with another question. So what happens if Leylines cross each other? Babaka says you get both powers. So I do like that. So you were mentioning like the alternative where maybe one overpowers, or if you're in the presence of one, others are lessened. But again, the idea that converging ones also boost it. I also love the idea that not only you get both, but I love the idea that at the apex, like at the actual perfect intersection, getting an alternative, like not just the boosted power of both, but a new power.
Like a new combination of the two.
Yeah,
So
like
those-
something
yeah.
that does not exist outside of when they touch. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's like just having I'm trying to think of like a good example of like if you were at the ley line, the two ley lines of like air and spirit, you could actually get like a new element or a new magical power that's like to be able to commune with the dead. Like that's where that comes from. Is
Interesting.
only when that happens, because like it's air, but then like if you had like spirit, yeah, I don't know, there's so many different layers that you could do with crossing them, but I would love the idea of like
Getting to
adding
yeah.
at that perfect apex, just something that doesn't exist outside of that. Like you have to be there, and again,
Especially because those things would become more and more rare, and like maybe there's only one point in all of existence where these two specific ley lines connect.
yeah, right. And then that could just be an overarching, like you have the ley lines explaining normal NPC shit, but maybe the most legendary of locations, the most legendary of NPCs to ever have existed were the ones that mastered the art of the intersections. Right? That could be, that would be really interesting. Hold up, it continues. So I understand that, but what if the powers are literally the opposite from each other, like heat and cold, right? So in this particular case, I don't know if you would really have like opposite ley lines, but
I think that's kind of the mindset behind these ley lines. Is I don't think any of these really have an opposite. I think they all, like you were talking about, a singular item and just different levels of these within it. And I think all of these particular ley lines marry together. They all are a part of kind of the same whole, like you're made up of arms, legs, fingers, toes, all of these are just the appendages of different things. And so it's just like, hey, I have bigger arms and bigger legs when I'm at this ley line crossing, but over there I have a really big head, or whatever the case is. It's like those different specific pieces become more powerful, become enhanced, you get those powers from them. But I think that when it comes to, I think it just
Freeman, hey,
makes it a
holy
little
shit,
simpler.
what is up? Yeah, no worries. So funny. I don't know if you ever saw, I tried to hit you up on Discord after you had popped in a couple weeks ago. You had some awesome questions for me, some stuff that I just wasn't really aware of at the time. And I tried to hit you up on Discord. I saw that you had joined, but I don't think you completed the onboarding yet, so I wasn't able to message you directly. But I ended up doing a video on that. What was the video called?
It was kind of recent. Hold on, let me look through.
Yeah, it was like 3 weeks ago. It was literally the day, like it was like the day or two after when I did a solo stream. I used your questions as a building point to talk, and I wanted to let you know about that because I was like, you weren't, I wasn't able to like let you know or send
backgrounds. No, removing curses.
No. This was like
that one?
is it safety tips or safety tools? Veil. It was like what was it? I think I have the message still that I sent you because I got rejected from trying to message you because
is that what happened?
Yeah, we don't share a server, so I wasn't able to message. Where was it? I could have sworn I messaged you, and it kicked it back. I guess not. I guess I don't have the saved message, probably because it didn't save anything. Yeah, my bad. I wasn't actually expecting to see you today, so I didn't have. I just want to know what the title is now, just so I could at least post it in the chat, just to prove I'm not lying. No. Let's see, YouTube Studio.
Yeah, I really want to know which.
I'll know it
one
once
that
I
is
see it.
now.
It was like 4 weeks ago. It was a while back. It was Luke. Background. It was before background features. Was it onboarding new players? Might have been onboarding, sense of emergency, roleplay over roleplay, and fixing foci. Was it before fixing foci?
Was it fixing foci?
No, was it before that? Attunement limit. Oh, Jesus. This was... We've done so many topics. Holy shit, man. Okay, so it was after that. Okay, so 0 HP, dynamic.
Time moves really fast, man. I'm telling you.
I know. Well, I mean, we're at 78 episodes now. Like, this should just, like... It racks up quick. Witnesses to the Cataclysm. It was after that. Fixing foci.
He says differences between 1st and 5th edition.
Properly using NPCs. You were here for that one. Roleplay over rolling. And then it must have been. It had to have been onboarding new players. It had to have been, right? Because no, there it is. Gaming etiquette. That's the one.
Is that the one where you went hard on?
No. No, last week the Raw Without Lore was the
That's
one that I was...
Raw Without Lore.
No,
That's
no.
The one.
Okay,
Yeah.
there it is. There it is. Let me grab this link for you. Again, really just wanted... Gaming etiquette. So... All right. I don't get on the Discord often. No worries. When you join our Discord, there's like a small onboarding process. You basically just have to like accept the rules, and then you can like ask for some roles and stuff. So until you do that, we don't actually. We saw that you tried to join, but it doesn't actually like make you active. So I wasn't able to message you directly to let you know. But I just posted that link in chat if you are interested. It was like the day or two after you had popped into stream. You gave me some unique ideas, some new terminology that I hadn't heard of, like fails,
right. Yes.
Cards, and basically like just like the things to help with it's a new community, so people gaming online, they have these opportunities to discuss things with DMs, like hard stops, like hey, I don't like these topics,
I'm uncomfortable with this.
or hey, can you just give me a warning
doing
so
like
I can
surveys
like leave
beforehand.
And so it was a cool thing, just something like things that I have done, but it's more of the social thing for me. It's more of I get to know my players and I get to know their boundaries, I just really wanted to thank you for that. It was a cool topic to talk about, and I appreciate you giving me the info. If you're interested, go check it out. So going back to our topic for today, though, where were we in chat? I think we were in chat because Freeman chopped in.
Yes,
that's right. We were. Yeah.
That is what happened.
Oh, and then Hoylepa had also something really interesting too to say, because I do like tying this in. Is if you think about, you have to be at the ley line. You have to attune to it. You have to be there for a long time. This would explain why you do find mages building random towers in the middle of fucking nowhere.
That's very fair.
Right?
That's
it's probably just
fair.
like, hey, I found a hot spot. This is where I'm at. I'm here forever. That was cool. Yeah, so very interesting there. So Bobicus, while you are deciding on how you want to submit this, if you want to rewrite this up and do a showcase, if you want to do it as a homebrew review, you let us know in the Discord. But with that being said, we did talk about a little bit of a surprise. So it's more of something that we weren't really prepared for, some kind of a bit of a surprise for us. So something that I've done very rarely, but I do once in a while when I'm trying to soundboard. This is, one of the reasons I've talked to you guys why it was so great that, Kage was able to start coming so much more often and becoming more of a presence here on the show is I love coming up with the ideas. I love answering your guys' questions. I love feeding off of you, the audience, but having someone here to talk when I'm needing a moment to think, or to just give that presence of ideas. Yeah, just really being here to express the ideas. And it's different talking to a camera. I can explain things to you guys, and I want to be entertaining. I want to I want to talk enough to get the idea across, but I also have to know when to cut my losses. Whereas with someone physically here, there's a different level of trying to explain it, right? Like, it's one thing to say, did I explain that for the camera? Like, did I explain that for a video? That's one thing. But for a human being to see him and know whether or not he's getting it, or whether or not I'm like on track. There's just something else about the soundboarding that works for me, right? And as much as I love, answering the questions and feeding off, I just having someone here to express those ideas is something that just helps me with my creativity a lot, which is one of the things I love about D&D, right? It's a bunch of people getting into a room and all being creative at once and just feeding off each other. I love it. But once in a blue moon, I, will be by myself. I'm having to come up with an idea, and I'll be doing research. I'll be looking through books, and I try as little as I can when I'm doing research or when I'm doing, because I don't like scripts. I don't like going over, previously done information unless
Very
I'm
much so.
referencing source books. So, I've tried to stay away from like ChatGPT and AI generated stuff for content, because if I'm using that for content, I might as well just have it write me a script and just be a YouTuber. You know what I mean? Like, the whole point of this is to talk about High Point, talk about things that we would do.
Yes.
And to talk off the cuff. Like, that is what we like to do here. We don't like to, that's why with Homebrew Review, we don't look at the submittals beforehand. We basically treat it as like we treat every D&D game, right? we can plan all we want, but you go into a D&D game and play it dynamically. You play it for what's happening. You don't talk to your DM about what's going to happen next game. You don't talk about what enemies you're going to see and what weapons they're carrying. You see that shit when it happens. And that's the way I like to talk about D&D. It's the way to do stuff. But I have used ChatGPT in order to help me soundboard when I don't have Kage here. And a lot of the times it's to help make sure that I have, references correctly. I'll have it, write me a list of reference books, because that's actually one of the biggest things I do is if I want to research something from D&D history, I will basically just have it tell me what resource books I can go find that stuff in, and then I will be able to
go check it out yourself.
So
it's honestly like a lot of Google searching. That's honestly what I
Yeah.
look at like AI as. Is it's like, hey, I'm gonna go Google something because
or I'll just have
anything.
it give me like 10, be like, hey, give me 10 things of this, and then that will give me like, again, just like talking with Kage, it'll just
Yeah.
be like back and forthing until I'm like, oh, okay, I don't like any of those, but I've caught on to some.
And to be
other
honest, that's
idea.
usually how it is. Is I don't like any of the things that it gives me, but it gives me an idea that, oh, let me go do this other thing that's kind of similar.
It's
but
basically it's a crappier version of soundboarding for me. So that's basically normally all I've ever done is I'll use it to do historical references or help soundboard a couple topics or directions that I want to go with the conversation, and that's usually where I drop it. But today was a little different. And today may be the only time this happens. Excuse me. Because normally I like to just use ChatGPT as a soundboard, and then I like to leave it behind because I want everything to be off the cuff. We don't want to have scripts. And I don't want this channel to become AI generated content. Like, that kind of removes the whole point of us being DMs. However, in my pursuit to help soundboard, we were kind of messing around right before stream, and I was chatting. We were actually just chatting about ChatGPT, specifically about the use of it with soundboarding. And I just had a random idea to throw it an interesting prompt based off of this topic today, because we've had Babakiss's previous examples where at first we only had two ley lines known, right? We had water and we had spirit. That's all we knew, and we knew a little bit about what each could do. Mm-hmm. We knew that water, what was it that we actually fed it? Because I gave it basically what Babakiss had told us, but basically it was the idea that we knew water was a ley line, and the let's see, what did we have beforehand? So at first we knew that water could manipulate like a liquid's HP, its temperature, its freezing point, boiling point, viscosity, density, adhesion, cohesion, and other aspects. We also know that spirit magic, or the spirit ley lines and spirit magic existed, that could bind spirits to things like golems and aspects like that. So I was coming out, I was talking with Kage about like, where this topic came from. We were kind of rehashing all of this history to kind of freshen our minds of like how we want to, tackle this. Like, which direction do we want to go? Because we didn't know that you had anything to submit to us yet. But I was like sitting here and I'm like, you know what? Let's just have some fun and let's just quickly throw in this prompt to ChatGPT and let's see what it would come up with to fill out. And it was kind of more of a, because we were sitting there throwing some ideas back and forth, and it was more of a, if we had a third person here, let's like see what, so, you know, what they would throw out. So it was more of a, let's just laugh at what ChatGPT would try to do, and then we'll move on. And maybe it'll, you know, spark some ideas, we'll write some notes, and we'll move on, like we always do. However, it's the first time that I gotta say, like, as impressive as the technology is, this might be the first time I've actually been impressed by what ChatGPT produced. In the sense that it caught me off guard, because 99% of the time, ChatGPT just gives me what I expected it to give me, you know, something more polished, something different, or I expect it to give me a hallucinogen-filled, you know, like novel of nothing. Yeah. So as we were reading through this, it was more of a, hey, let's just read what it wrote and we'll laugh at it and then we'll move on. And then the more we read, just the kind of like, the better it started to sound, and not in the sense of like, oh my gosh, this is like the best thing I've ever heard and I want to use it. But it's more of a, I was just caught off guard on how well it worked with the little that I gave it, and how well it actually seemed to fit into Bobakis's previous world, the Dulac dwarves and the Jaquette, because of just the way that it had written the ideas behind Leylines. It was really interesting to see, like, reading through this from the point of view of the Jaquette town, and it was like, this actually would fit really, really well in. So we talked about it real quick, and we don't really normally want to do this, and it's not something we want to do in the future, but I do kind of want to go over a bit of what ChatGPT threw out at us, because again, it's more of a highlight of just really interesting concepts, and they're good talking points. But I'm really interested, Bob, because if you like where it went, I don't think you will, because again, this is going in the same direction that we were going to go in with the more traditional elements.
I'll say this. It might not be the way that Bobicus wants to go, but I think it still might be, just at the very least, very inspiring, I to go over.
It's unique, to say the least. Like, it was pretty unique.
Put it this way. I have used ChatGPT and AI for a while now, doing a lot of different stuff. I use it for programming and just my own D&D content, like inspiration, and for the majority of the time it gives me a whole lot of nothing. But there are times where, even though what comes out isn't what I want, even though it still needs to be molded, it brings me a foundation, it brings me an inspiration platform that I would not have had otherwise, and that I can really appreciate.
I think a lot of the times it gives me a lot of just bad ideas, and eventually leads me to a good idea of my own.
Sometimes it points me in the opposite direction of where I want to go, and be like, "Hey, I now know I want to go exactly opposite of
exactly." That. And Babaka says, "We'll see." Yeah, like I said, this isn't meant for, like, specifically for you, but it is interesting, and I wanted to kind of showcase some of it. So I'm going to read, the one part I will read in full is my prompt, like what I basically gave it. Because before this, all I basically, I was asking it was like, refreshing it with history from D&D lore of Leylines. But the prompt specifically that I gave it, that I thought, that generated the most interesting feedback. So I said, taking the idea that two Leylines are currently known, one of water and one of spirit. The use of these ley lines allows for magic. It is known that water magic allows for the manipulation of a liquid's pH, temperature, freezing point, boiling point, viscosity, density, adhesion, cohesion, among other things. Little is known about spirit magic, except that it can be used to Little is known about spirit magic, except that the use of spirit magic allows for the animation of stone and wooden golems and the creation of spirit mazes, used to trap wandering spirits and put them into golems for animation. Combining these two magics creates spirit water, which has the only known use of binding a spirit to the mortal plane and into a body. I wrote this because at the time I couldn't officially remember everything you had written in the previous one. And then I basically told it, using the above information and inspiration from D&D, Avatar: The Last Airbender, and the Dresden Files, and Genshin Impact, create a full picture of Leylines and fill in for the other elements. So again, more of a fun, I just wanted to see what it would spit out. And what it spit out was, again, oddly in line with what we were expecting to talk about ourselves. Like, so I guess that's more of it. It was more of like it was along the same lines of what we were thinking, but it just kind of took a unique spin. So it broke out and it gave us water, spirit, earth, and air. For some reason, the first time around, it didn't give us fire, so I had it add fire. But now that I'm thinking about that, now that we've done looking at Babakis's idea, I find it funny that I told it that we know that there's water and spirit, and then I told it to fill out the rest of the elements. And ChatGPT chose there only to be water, spirit, earth, and air.
Interesting.
So it's funny that, again, Babakis doesn't have a fire ley line.
I mean, that's true. That's true.
There is an air and a water, and ChatGPT came up with an air and a water. But it was just one of those things. I'm like, why didn't you finish off with fire? Like, a lot of the times there's earth, air, fire, wind, water, spirit. Like, what? Why? Like, it was very just. Now that I'm thinking about it, I'm like, okay, even more kind of a coincidence of the direction it was thinking.
Right.
And then, so we're gonna go over just a couple of the ideas of what it came up with ley lines, and then the more interesting aspect is I basically told it to come up with some other combinations of the ley lines. So I said basically taking the idea of what spirit water is, come up with other combinations.
Right.
So those were also very interesting. I think I was more excited about those than anything else. But what ChatGPT came up with is in this world, basically just kind of helping us build the idea. So in this world, ley lines are mystical conduits of energy that traverse the land, connecting various sacred sites, natural wonders, and points of magical significance. Now, remember, I haven't told ChatGPT anything about the Dulac dwarves or the Jaquette or any of that. It knows
true.
Nothing about your setting, Babakis. But there are some things that it just said, and I'm just like, man, that's oddly similar to what Babakis was saying. ChatGPT originally gave us 4, but 5 primary ley lines, each one with a classable element. And they're basically channels of raw energy to their respective elements, influencing the environment and producing sources of power. So the water ley line, I like how it describes this. So it says like the water ley line courses through rivers, lakes, and oceans, pulsing with the essence of fluidity and change. Those attuned with this ley line can manipulate water in all forms, basically doing what Babakis has said originally. Water magic users can summon tidal waves, freeze enemy in solid ice, or create dense fog. And it's often associated with healing and purification rituals, as well as divination practices involving water scrying. So that was kind of like the picture it gave about water. And I'm like, you know what? Like, as a full picture, that sounded right. You know what I mean? Like, it's not groundbreaking. It's not like, oh my God, I need to like have this in my world. But with so little of a prompt, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
It kind of filled out the rest of that picture of like the healing, the purification, water scrying. I'm like, okay, you're building me like a pretty nice picture here of what's going on, right?
I feel that.
And then it went on with spirit. So it filled out the spirit for us, mysterious and elusive. It's said to flow through ancient forests, forgotten ruins, and sacred burial grounds. I don't know why it did this, but it filled in like how the ley lines flow through power. Like, I guess, because again, I told it to take these other influences and all those other areas talk about like flows of energy.
Right.
So again, I like how it kind of like separated this out, and it made it separated out in a pretty good way, I think. It talks about how like the spirit ley lines can allow you to commune with the spirits, animate the golems, manipulate wandering souls, and then I kind of like this. The spirit magic users are adept at exorcisms, spiritual protections, and astral projection. It's also rumored that it can connect to the realm of dreams and the afterlife, allowing for communication with the departed. That was a cool add-on that it did, where it's like dreams and afterlife and being able to communicate with the dead. Like, nice little touch there. I mean, communicate with the dead kind of makes, it's on par with spiritual magic.
For sure.
But the dream one was like a nice little add-on there. I was like, okay, I could see that, right? And that's like, going back to what you were saying, Babakis, like that could be a byproduct of one of the many NPCs that have attuned with the spirit ley line. Maybe that's how dream magic is discovered.
I mean, think about a lot of the mindset behind spirits is you have, astral projection and like entering into, other realms, like that. And so entering into like this dream state, this dream world, like
Going
that,
to, like, limbo
that's
or something
exactly.
even? Like,
That's not crazy far off.
So yeah, well, pretty cool idea. The Earth ley line, I think this one was like, the iffiest or whatever. Winds its way through mountains, caverns, fertile soil, resonating with the solidarity and endurance of the Earth itself. Those that harness the power can manipulate terrain, shaping stone, soil with ease, causing earthquakes, summoning mighty Earth constructs. So earthen constructs, that sounded kind of cool. They're skilled in geomancy, metalworking, and plant manipulation. So this is where the one thing about the Earth that the ChatGPT kind of took an interesting spin is it's saying that the Earth ley line is revered by, or Earth magic users are skilled in geomancy, metalworking, and plant manipulation. It is revered by druids, miners, and craftsmen who draw upon its strength to fortify their settlements and protect the land. So I thought that was interesting because before we kind of understood that this was more of an NPC magics, I was thinking you were leaning more towards this is how I'm explaining magic.
Yeah.
And I thought that was actually one of the best things that ChatGPT really did with this, is it alluded to the idea that you could, and I brought this up with Kage right before streaming. I think that it was when I read that I was really starting to get excited about like this whole thing, is it alludes to the idea that you could categorize each magic in D&D under a ley line. Like you could have the idea that, like all druids like tap into this earth ley line, right? Because it's about the plant magic. And it was just more of a, nothing changes about how magic works, but if you wanted to approach it from the idea of what category of magic you fall under, that would be kind of interesting. So I think that was just a really interesting picture that this painted.
I do like that.
To kind of tie all of this in. And then let's see. Air ley lines dancing through the skies carry breath of life and power through the winds, sweeping through open plains, high peaks, ancient ruins, imbuing the atmosphere with vitality and movement. Those attuned can control weather, summon storms, and manipulate air currents in order to levitate objects and propel them through the sky. Bobakis had already mentioned that that's what people do. They can propel themselves in airships, so it's right in line with that. This is kind of another thing I like. Air magic users are adept at illusions, speed enhancing spells, communication over long distances, and they're often associated with freedom, creativity, and the ever changing nature of existence. That's a little bit fluff. That doesn't really like say anything.
Yeah.
But again, all in line, and I'm liking this idea of, again, if you were to, instead of base it off of an NPC model, if you were to incorporate ley lines more as your mechanic for magic, it gives you a lot of that creativity to put limitations in certain areas and on certain people, right?
Right.
It makes a lot of interesting concepts here. And then a little bit more that I think is, it ends with these two last paragraphs that, again, I felt really resonated with what
yes,
with, like, the Jaquette and the Jaluk dwarves.
Yes.
Like, this is the part where, like, after we read this, like, maybe we should read this on the stream, just because this kind of came full circle in a way that we weren't expecting, because, again, we didn't tell it anything about the prior stream or about that other idea. We just gave it that prompt I read you guys, which was, we know 2 ley lines, fill out the rest. But it goes on to say, the convergence of these ley lines creates areas of intense magical energy known as nexuses, where the elements mingle and intertwine. These nexus are often sites of great power and mystery, attracting adventurers, scholars, and seekers of arcane knowledge. Exactly what Bobakis was basically alluding to in the Jaquette. However, they can also be dangerous, as the chaotic energies unleashed by the intersection ley lines can cause unpredictable phenomena and attract malevolent entities from other realms. I also like that, having these intersections also be portals, potentially. Like, that was kind of a cool, like, intersection of why these areas are often sought by the most powerful NPCs, right? Maybe they're hoping something will come through and they can capture it. Maybe they're trying to find a way somewhere. Like,
interesting.
Leaving it up to the NPCs, you can make these as powerful as you want, and it doesn't matter because the players will never touch it. So you could really be like, you could have your BBEG basically hoping to summon essentially the version of Cthulhu through one of these intersections, and that's the whole thing he's trying to do, is get enough power to open that door, right?
Right.
And then it goes on to say spirit water. Let's see. So, Oh yeah, so this was this one was more of interesting. So we just told it about the spirit water just briefly, and this is what it said. And again, this one was just eerie because it was like, this is basically like exactly what Babakis said. So spirit water, rare and potent substance created by combining the energies of water and spirit ley lines, believed to hold the key to binding spirits to the mortal plane. It said that those who possess spirit water can bridge the gap between the material and spiritual worlds, summoning and controlling spirits to their bidding. However, the creation of spirit water is closely guarded secret, known only to a select few sages and mystics who dwell in the heart of the nexus where the water and spirit ley lines converge. Doesn't that sound exactly like the town of the Jaquette? Like, isn't that exactly
right?
what Babakis wrote? Is that there was that place just like deep somewhere that is exactly what they did. And
That's so funny.
And then, so I had to tell it to add fire. So this is what it did for the fire ley line. Fire ley line blazes across volcanic landscapes, deserts, ancient forges, and embodies the primordial energy of combustion and transformation. Courses through molten lava flows and crackling flames, radiating heat and intensity. Those who tap in gain mastery over flame, allowing them to conjure infernos, manipulate heat, and forge powerful enchantments. They can use it to unleash devastating pyrokinetic attacks, create protective barriers of flame, and imbue objects with fiery projectiles. It's often associated with passion destruction and a cycle of renewal through purifying fire. So I thought that was interesting. Nothing groundbreaking, but I did think that was definitely along the lines of where I think we were originally going with mindset before we read what you had given us. Fire is purity. Yeah, that's kind of a cool concept
very much
too,
like
right?
that.
And I like the idea that because I had to add it, you might even be able to say like fire's the rarest. Like maybe there's like only one fire ley line, and it's like
interesting.
Like it's super hard to find or something. But yeah, a little fire purity. So I thought that was kind of a cool concept. And then we asked it, so we said, hey. I gave it another option. I said, create more combinations like spirit water, because we told it what spirit water does.
And I like that sometimes when you do prompts that are like very concise and not super specific, that it gives it an opportunity to be a little bit more creative with it. I think there's a good chance for that.
So that was basically all ChatGPT said about ley lines themselves. So if you wanted another opinion, there you go on that one. Looks like you might have liked the fire and purity combo, but that's only if you wanted to add the more traditional elements to the ley lines, right? And again, that's why I said that's where we were originally going to go with this. But these were some fun bonus items, right? So these are other combinations of magical phenomena if you add the ley line powers that ChatGPT came up with. Because this is an area that I was struggling with, and this is kind of the direction I wanted to help ChatGPT like spur some ideas.
Right.
And they just kind of ended up being... They're cool concepts, but they don't work for this. These are just kind of a bonus material because we were talking about it. But as cool as these are, they just don't fit with the rest of the ley line concepts. Sulfur could represent a purifying force. There you go. Yeah, sulfur could be like the purifying ley line.
That's kind of cool. That's very kind of cool.
So you had spirit water, which could bind a spirit to a body. So I said, ChatGPT, create me some other ones. So
give me more.
First one it created was the earth fire crystal. Created deep within a volcanic cavern where both earth and fire ley lines intersect. Luminous gems pulse with combined energies, radiating warmth and stability. They're highly sought after for their potent enchanting properties, capable of imbuing objects with both resilience and fiery power, often used in creating magical weapons, armors, and protective wards. I thought that this would be kind of cool because, again, if you were going to have this idea of an entire world based off of ley lines, you could even say that, and again, you could have almost this new mindset where magic isn't put into things, like the idea of I'm going to enchant this dagger to where now it does fire damage. You can have, with these ideas of ley lines, you can have this whole mindset that magic doesn't go into items, magic only comes from items. So this idea of this earth fire crystal, maybe this is the only way you make magical weapons. Like, you were going more with the idea of it's NPC only, they have to attune to the ley line to use the power, but this was more of a direction of, what if you have to mine these earthen gems? That is forged into a weapon, and that's what gives it its power. So you take away magical imbuement as a process, and the idea fundamentally is you can't put magic into anything. You can only withdraw magic out. So you have to build in. You literally have to build in. You have to forge in these materials into the metal in order for it to have that property that you can then extract out.
Very much so. And I like the idea of it being able to, or needing to go out and like actually get a thing. It's like I know you have like too many like fetch quests out there sometimes, but sometimes it's like, you know, especially because for somebody like me, Dobbed, he's got his staff, right? And like when you have a weapon, when you have something that you've built that's special to you, like it's so cool when, like, imagine if he finds a way to like reforge his staff with some like other type of like core, like maybe like a meteorite core or something like that. Who freaking knows, right? And then it can like do some new stuff. Like imagine getting to like come together and create and cultivate and like, hey, I want to make sure that my weapon has got like this amazing like resistance to any sort of fire or resistance to any sort of, you know, whatever it is, you know.
Absolutely.
And, like I love the idea of being able to like make that your own.
Absolutely. What else did they come up with? Not all of these were great. They had an arrow water, whirlwinds. So this, again, not all of these are physical, right? So we had the earth fire gem, or crystals. They had the earth fire crystals. So this one's called an arrow water whirlwind. So basically, it's like a swirling vortex of air and water. So basically, like a tornado, like that is only in certain locations. Like where, you know, obviously where the ley lines intersect and where there's just obviously a lot of like, you know, water. So usually like you would think coastal,
right.
beach, you know, like oceans or something like that. But the idea is like it's an actual location. So it's like it can, you know, basically launch ships into the air, destroy them. But ChatGPT goes on and says, but if you have people who are brave enough to navigate and actually get in through the whirlwinds, maybe they can discover treasure or a hidden portal
like
somewhere.
The eye of the storm or something like that. Interesting. I like the idea that these areas of destruction, kind of like the Bermuda Triangle, have been like sucking things in there and destroying it for years, and nobody's ever been able to get through. But somebody who might be able to find their way to the center could. Who knows what gems that?
And again, it's like
would be waiting
brings
for
the
them.
idea of like you have all of these in Bobakis's world. You have all of these NPCs who have taken time to attune with it, but that's only what the mortals do with it. What are the ley lines doing to each other naturally, right? This can explain how you have those situations. I mean, you talk about like that floating castle, whatever, that floating city. What if that's in the eye of the storm because it's being held up by it, right? Like that would be really interesting to see, like what would happen. Tornado of bubbles. I would make breathable. Oh yeah, breathable water. There you go. You can make like
that would be sick.
That could explain like your own version of Atlantis. Is because they're on a ley line and everyone can breathe underwater, so that's how you get Atlantis.
That's crazy. Almost like I keep thinking for whatever reason like the Gungan city when in Star Wars where they first go underwater. Imagine them just not needing those little weird breathing things, but just these waters because they were born of this ley line.
The water's just aerated.
Exactly.
You know? Yeah, so that would just be so cool.
That's so crazy. That's pretty cool though.
So this one, I think, out of the ones that it created, this one might be my favorite in terms of what it alludes to. And this one, I also think might be the best one that would be closest to what Babakis could use. It's called the Spectral Flames. This is when fire and spirit ley lines converge within the ruins of like an ancient temple dedicated to a forgotten god. They'll give rise to spectral flames. They are ghostly blue flames that flicker and dance with ethereal light, casting eerie shadows that seem to reach out and beckon the unwary. So I like this idea that it's not the flame that's taking shape, but the shadow it casts can be like this grotesque creature, right? It's like the shadow is the spirit, but the flame is just what's casting it, right? The spectral flames are said to burn with the essence of departed souls, offering glimpses into the realm of the dead and granting visions of the future. Those who dare to harness the power may unlock untold mysteries or risk being consumed by the darkness that lurks within. So
that's crazy.
This idea that, you know, like, again, it's like maybe this is that, you know, most afterlife concepts have like the passage. What if this is that passage, right? You have to pass through like the eternal flames. It's burning off your mortal coil. But in the real world, when these two ley lines intersect, you actually get to physically see that veil. That this is basically like the closest you're going to see to that journey before you die. Is you get to see people going through that journey by essentially the representation of these flames. And the idea that yeah, you could like harness them, talk to the dead, get glimpses of the future, get glimpses of the past. Like, it was the closest thing to where this felt the most like what Babakis was going after. Is this concept of like the flames are there, but they are a means to see into that spirit world, right? Just,
yes,
they don't do much. I would even go so far as to say, like, if you could harness this flame, like you could do like this, like, oh man, can you imagine having a spell that harnesses this flame, or a weapon made by an NPC that harnesses this flame that doesn't just hurt you, or it doesn't take away HP, it doesn't lower your HP.
Interesting.
It lowers your max HP.
Interesting.
So if you're
there are some like specters and stuff that do that in 5e.
That's what I'm saying. So it's like, imagine this spectral flame, or if I had like a dagger of this spectral flame, or if I could shoot the spectral flame, and you're at like, let's say you're at 50 of 100 points, and I hit you and I do 20 points of damage. You don't lose any of your 50, but now you're 50 out of 80.
That's crazy.
That would be fucking devastating.
And imagine there's like no wound on the person
That's
at
the
all.
idea. It's because it's literally scarring you, like you're burning your soul. Like it's just a scar on your soul. Like,
That's crazy.
That would be so fucking cool. So yeah, this is one of those ones where it would be really interesting. So Babakis says, sulfur and spirit is the oracle of Delphi. Oh yeah, okay. I see that. I totally see that.
I like that a lot.
Yeah, okay. So yeah, I like the spectral flame. I thought that was my favorite one so far, just because it alludes to that, like, out of all of these, that one's the one that alludes most to the ley lines intersecting or actually interacting with each other, and
right.
giving a much better understanding of not just producing something, but actually like
how they interact with each other. Yeah.
Earth and ether. What was this one? These are more crystals. So these are earth and air, shimmering crystals. What do they do? Used by so these were like earth and ether were like green crystals that were basically used by druids. You can plant them and they would give like growth and vitality to the nearby area, and then they could like heal the wounded, purify tainted and corrupted lands, things like that. So kind of a good concept. Let's see, what else do we have here? Arrow flame, which is air and fire, mainly just to do fire users. Spectral streams, spirit and water, but you already have a spirit and water one. This one was more of like travel based between like the afterlife and stuff like that. Earth and Galestones, flame bound rivers. Oh, that'd be kind of interesting. Fire and water. These rivers of molten lava, scalding steam, traverse rugged terrain, carrying out fiery canyons. So that one's more of like a physical force. So yeah, most of these weren't that amazing. Mercury and air is aerogel. Salt and air, a light, fluffy substance which dissolves in water, produces a clean, fresh wind. Ooh.
Oh, that sounds very cool.
Yeah, that would be really interesting. So yeah, so hopefully, again, I don't think that the ChatGPT created a brand new thing for anybody to, like start using it and recrafting on, but it definitely did give some ideas, and I kind of like what it was doing with the combining the ley lines. Like it has some solid concepts there that I think, again, I wouldn't ever use it as is, but throwing something at ChatGPT and just seeing what it kind of does to help soundboard with you, like this, just this idea of gave us a couple combos. Now we can create better ones. Like I wouldn't use those specific ones, but now we can dive into, now that we have some fresh concepts, what can we do that's better? And that's the great thing about ChatGPT, is it gives you a bunch of crap so you can find out what's better.
Very much so.
Let's see, sulfur and air, inflammable air do not breathe. That would be fucking crazy.
Imagine you like, and then you just light a match. Oh my gosh, somebody would die.
Yeah.
Somebody would die.
So yeah, so that's the topic on ley lines. I really hope that helped you, Babakis. I hope that gave you plenty of ideas. I hope that helps you solidify some of your ideas. I love the direction you're going with that. Don't get me wrong. I honestly, if you were to ask me what I would prefer, I think I would prefer a showcase submission instead of a review, because I think that this deserves to be talked about from what your players, like what players that you will eventually run into, what they might be interested in, and what what the reaction is to players. Because at this point, unless you're trying to eventually write this up to give to other DMs, I think this is definitely more of something that we're going to want to discuss in a concept of what's approachable from a player point of view instead of what's usable by a DM. And I'll leave it at that. I think that's
fair.
My preference, just because I believe that the idea deserves that approach, and I really want to see where you go with this without going the same direction I would, which is the more traditional D&D route. Let's see. No, it's because purifying air is too pure. It purifies the flesh off your body. Holy shit.
Purifies the flesh off your body.
Purifies the flesh.
Tell me how you really feel.
I want that to be an NPC's. Oh my God. Can you imagine? Like, that would be like the worst thing to hear from like a paladin is he just looks at you and be like, I'm here to purify. I'd be like, no one's evil here. No one cares. And just looks at you. He's like, I will purify the skin from your bones. That would just especially if it's like lawful good and someone just says that, like, I will purify the skin off you. That sounds terrifying and I don't like it.
I don't.
Oh man.
Leave me alone.
But yes, I think that's going to be us for tonight. Bobakis, thank you for the topic. I know it was a bit of a wait. I hope it wasn't too long. I hope it was well worth the wait. And I hope we gave you some ideas. I am really excited to see what you do. Please submit that whenever you can, but don't feel like you're in a rush. We will absolutely either, if you want a review, we'll do a review. If you do it as a showcase, we'll throw that on there as well. It'll go into the line. I think we have the next 2 weeks planned? No, 3 weeks.
We have three. We have three in the tank ready to go.
I love it. I love having stuff in the tank. So, we'll throw that on the Monday schedule whenever you get that into us. So that would be fantastic. Thank you so much. This was such a fun topic to research. It was very cool. It was really cool to talk about. It is. Again, it's one of those aspects of, I think we're all familiar with it. I think everybody's who have heard of Leylines, but definitely underutilized. Not a lot of places,
very much so, and not very expounded upon. I think a lot of people have a lot of different ideas on what Leylines are and what they do and stuff like that, and I think this is really good to kind of articulate the mindset behind it.
And I really like the idea that, again, it's not so much the elements as it is the characteristics.
Yes,
that's the biggest difference between this approach.
Yes,
it's not about what elements or what's inside of it. It's the characteristics that you get out of it. And these are just how you describe what those characteristics are. So I think that's fantastic. I love it. I want to see more. Again, thank you so much. Hoilepa, thank you for showing up. And thank all of you that showed up and chatted with us. I know Cosmic was in the chat. Freeman, thank you so much for showing up again. Hope to see you in the Discord soon. Hoilepa, Babakis, thank you guys so much for keeping us company. We do appreciate it, and we love when you guys are in chat. If you guys liked this episode and you missed anything, or if you want to check out any of our other live streams, we have all of those on our VODs channel on YouTube. You can see that link in the chat right now if you would like to go and visit our YouTube channel, like and subscribe. If you are watching on YouTube, it does help us out. I don't know if this will be just live or if this will be an edited content. Who knows? Maybe someday. Yes, Mind's Eye, thank you so much, Babakiss. Mind's Eye, thank you so much for the lurk. We do appreciate you showing up and just hanging out. It does really help us. We are on our way to affiliate. We are 3 followers away, and I think we're still averaging 1.8 concurrent viewers, so we still got to get that up to 3, guys.
Just
we got to get up to 3,
bit.
but hey, the lurk helps. We do.
Yes.
We do love that. So thank you guys so much. Babakiss, thank you for the call. I really appreciate you doing that. If you guys liked this topic and you guys had any topics that you want to hear us talk about, if you have questions that you want to hear us answer, or if you have items that you want to items, classes, spells, anything that you want to submit for homebrew review, you can do that in our Discord. I will pop that link into the chat as well, so you can go ahead, join the Discord, chat with the lovely people in our community, submit items for us, submit topics, or otherwise just come hang out. Otherwise, that's going to be it. I hope you guys had a great week, and I hope you have a great weekend ahead of you. We will be back on Monday at 7 p.m. for the next homebrew review, which we have one of our newest followers, actually. His boar has submitted 2 new items, and Monday is going to be, do you have the name
Godly of it? Entertainer.
Godly
Yes.
Entertainer or Entertainment?
Entertainer?
Is it a class?
It's a class.
All right.
It
So
is a class.
on Monday, we will be here with his boar's Godly Entertainer class. Come join us for that. You will be here on Monday?
I will indeed.
All right.
It'll be a
We'll
good
join us
time.
there. Have a great rest of your weekend, guys. Cheers.
Cheers, my friends.